which looked like it would take the largest tray bucket in the world to be able to carry it. Prydain, uncertain, tried pushing it. What the fuck, he thought as it moved at just his light touch. He bent down and put his left hand as far down into the base as he could and managed to lift it up. By all the gods, he thought as he marveled at his newfound strength. Now punch the rock, she said. He did as he was told, and was shocked at how the rock exploded, pieces flying in all directions as he punched through it. He stared at his hand to see no blood or sign of what he had just done. How did this come to pass, he asked. You prayed to the gods underneath a full moon and you drank from their pool, waters blessed by the gods themselves. And in the same place that you were born, she explained. And your heritage as a Stark possesses powers beyond all comprehension. Where do you think the term wolf blood comes from? What other powers do I have? Prydain asked. Your strength and speed on the battlefield will be outmatched, none will ever be as fast or as deadly as you. Your senses are far stronger, you can see, smell and hear far greater than any other. All wolves of the world, whether a small southern wolf or the largest dire wolf, will see you as their king and follow all of your commands. Whilst not invulnerable, blades, arrows and axes will hurt you slightly, but not fatally. There's a catch. There must be. At what cost, he asked. Dragon fire, Valyrian steel and wolfsbane. They are the only things which can kill you. And you will transform, whether intentionally or not, she explained, standing straight and her arms back to her side. Transform, he asked. She turned to her right and pointed at a pool of water that Prydain hadn't noticed until now. Look at the water deeply, she commanded. Prydain did as he was bid and walked to the water. Looking at his reflection, nothing changed. He seemed so normal. As if nothing had happened. Does it hurt you, my prince? Knowing that your father is prisoner to the Valyrian dragon lords of the south. That as of now, he is being treated like any common thief in the black cells of the Red Keep. Tortured and taunted by those who think themselves better than northerners. Each word of hers changed something inside him. He felt a deep and unnerving anger. One he had never ever felt before. It made him feel powerful and the urge to slaughter and destroy all that he could see. He could hear bones crack as he involuntarily twitched a few times. When he stopped twitching, he looked down at the water again, and could see how he had changed. He was unrecognizable. He had eyes, glowing red and orange like fire, with oval pupils glowing black like the night sky. And his teeth were no longer human teeth, but like the fangs of direwolf. His ears were large and pointed like a drawing of a creature from one of Old Nan's books. His muscles were larger and bulging more all around his body, from his neck to his feet. How, he asked. But just from asking that one word, he realized his voice was deeper, like the growling of a wolf. There are two transformations as a werewolf. The first is the one you are in right now. The second, that is the one which is downplayed as a myth in children's stories and books. That is the true form of a werewolf, she said. And how do I transform into that, asked Prydain. By your own will. It will take a long time for you to work out how. But when you do, your powers will be doubled, you will feel no pain and no fear. You will be unstoppable and feared by all. But, there is a price to so much power. What price, he asked. Use the ultimate power too many times, and you will be dependent and obsessed with it. And slowly, you will become feral and uncontrollable. It will slowly drive you mad, she explained. Your emotions and feelings, my prince, they are much stronger than they used to be. Your love for your wife, your children and your family is stronger. But at the same time, all things and ones you hate, merely speaking of them or listening to them speak, will intensify your hatred and make you transform. Prydain looked at his humanoid form in the water's reflection once more. He picked up a stick left lying on the ground and swung it around several times. He realized that he was far faster and more agile than he ever was. Use your powers wisely, my prince. For the greatest test isn't the armies you will face, nor the Targaryens or their dragons. Your greatest test will be you and whether you can control yourself and fight to save your country, your people and your family. Or will you become obsessed with the powers of the gods and use them for your own gain and slowly lose everything that you love? I would die before I harm my people, my friends or my family, Prydain said without hesitation. She seemed to ignore him as she walked closer to him and looking hard at his fiery and piercing eyes. There is more to the Starks' famous wolf blood than just being wild and carefree. You and yours are blessed with a power that only Starks can inherit, she explained. And if I choose to no longer be a werewolf, he asked. You drink from the pool under an unobscured sun, she replied. How do you know so much, he asked. Because I was once a werewolf, she replied. You are a Stark, he asked. No. But one of my ancestors was a Stark. She was Beatrice Stark, whom had my great-great-grandmother with Bale the Bard, she replied. When did you give up your powers, he asked. Soon after I had given birth to my son, for I feared that he too would become a werewolf and not learn how to control himself. But, he didn't. It's not until you drink from the pool, that you become a werewolf, she replied. Prydain looked back at the water and saw that his face was back to normal, as though he was a human and not a werewolf. What happens now? Asked Prydain. Now, you return home, my prince. You have a war to prepare for and many southerners to kill. But remember what I said, control your anger and do not let it get the better of you. And only when you must, use the second transformation, she explained. I will, said Prydain before he was given his clothes back, and then he left the cave. Notes. So now, Prydain is a werewolf. And from the descriptions provided, a werewolf's first form is similar to what you see in Teen Wolf. Whereas the second form, is a more traditional werewolf, like in Skyrim. Chapter 37, Preparations for War. Chapter text. Eddard 17. Gods, what has become of these fucking Targaryens? Breaking the sacred guest rite, and in the castle of another house. But, Ash is safe. I know it. If she was not, then they would not hesitate to taunt me about it, Eddard thought as he stretched out his legs in his cell. He grunted as he stretched out his wounded leg. Harrenhal's Maester Karatassis has briefly treated his leg before he was thrown into a wheelhouse destined for King's Landing. Eddard had thanked the gods that neither Oregon nor Cersei had recognized Edmure Tully as he had led the counter-attack and rescued Ash and Arthur. I don't care what happens to me. As long as she is safe, our children are safe and the North is safe, he thought as looked around the cell. How many innocents have died in these cells for no other crime than insulting Cersei Lannister, her fragile self-importance, and saying that Elia was a better queen, he wondered as he saw blood stains on the walls and scratch marks from where people had been cuffed to the manacles on the wall. On the day he had been thrown into the black cells, he had been visited by Cersei Lannister, accompanied by her brother Jaime and Sir Barristan Selmy. Cersei Lannister. Careful where you stand, Queen of the Six Kingdoms, you may get blood on your perfect silk dress, he gruffly said. He didn't know whether it was his sarcasm or calling her Queen of the Six Kingdoms which had infuriated her before she stepped inside his cell. You are a traitor, Eddard Stark, and all traitors should suffer for the treasons they inflict on the Iron Throne. And you have committed many crimes against House Targaryen and House Lannister, your betters, she snapped with haughty superiority. This is coming from the criminals whom broke sacred guest rite, murdered my men, backstabbed me and ordered for my wife to be raped, he roared. He saw how Sir Barristan reacted when he mentioned what almost became of Ash. Was that why he didn't try and seize her and he faced Edmure Tully rather than allow her to be taken prisoner? Because he loves Ash. Your allies failed, Eddard Stark. We caught your wife and the Knight of the Blue Hood. He was a piss-poor challenge, said Jaime Lannister with a taunting grin, showing gleaming white teeth. If they did, they would know who he really is, thought Eddard as he recognized him from his voice and from Faith, the sword he gifted House Tully for allowing the treaty to be signed and negotiated at Riverrun. Is that so? And his name? Asked Eddard. Some northern savage. There are so many, he replied with a shrug. Eddard laughed mirthlessly. He enjoyed seeing just how angry they were at how he was laughing at them. Do you really think that the North is your only enemy? You fucking tyrants have more enemies around Westeros. When war begins, the North won't be alone on the battlefield against you fucking southern cowards and liars, said Eddard. And then they will burn. All of them. The banners have been called. My children shall fly their dragons into battle and burn all who dare oppose House Targaryen and House Lannister, Cersei superciliously said. And be remembered as being just like their murderous and tyrannical grandfathers, Eddard pointed out. Sir Barristan, hit his leg, hissed Cersei with a dark fury. Eddard looked up at Sabaristan, whom looked angry and ashamed of what he had been ordered to do. Eddard just nodded to him. Sabaristan kicked Eddard's leg. Though he could feel the pain, he was not going to let them get the better of him. "Have you come to torture me with beatings or with the sound of your fucking voice?" Eddard asked. "No. Merely to advise you to write to your son. To lay down his arms, surrender and swear House Stark's eternal fealty to House Targaryen." "Do so, and you will be spared and serve in the Night's Watch," she replied. "And what becomes of Prydane's children?" Eddard asked. He already knew what her answer was and what his answer would be. "Shall be warded in King's Landing or Casterly Rock alongside all other heirs to northern houses until the Iron Throne can be assured of the loyalty of said houses," she said. "And why should the North be subjected to more fucking tyranny of the fucking South? If you think that the North fears you or will ever fear you, then you truly are a fucking stupid Lannister bitch. I told your idiot husband in the throne room many years ago that the North remembers and winter is coming. And winter will come for you all. But first, all Starks and all Northerners shall die," said Cersei with an evil grin before she left with her brother and Sabaristan. Loras 4. Loras reread the most recent letter from Renly as he sat in his chambers. Before they had left King's Landing, he for Storm's End and Loras for Highgarden. Loras had told Renly that he loved him and Renly kissed him before telling him that he loved him too. Hearing him say those words made Loras feel the happiest he had ever felt in his life. But whilst reading those words be said on a piece of parchment weren't as good as hearing them from his love and in person, it gave him the energy boost he needed to get out of his chambers and start training for the morning. A knock on the door interrupted him as he finished rereading the letter. "Enter," said Loras. It was his squire, Daikon Tarly, heir to House Tarly and Horn Hill. "Sir Loras. Your armor is repaired and ready," he said. Loras' armor had been damaged in training when Garland had battered into his breastplate with a mace. "Thank you," Daikon said Loras before he stood up. Daikon helped Loras put on his armor and he walked onto the training yard and was walking to his horse when he heard his eldest brother. "Loras. Come to the Solar." "I'm coming, brother." Loras called back. "This better be important. I hate being interrupted from my training." Loras kept his armor on as he made his way to Father's Solar, where Willers was seated on Father's chair and Maester Lomis, mother, grandmother and Margaery were already seated down. As Loras sat down, Willers held up a letter. "This has just arrived from King's Landing." "War," said Willers. "War? With who?" "The Northerners." But as Loras was excited for war and for the chance of glory, he was worried. What if Robert Baratheon sides with the Starks? Will that mean that we will have to fight Renly? "With the North?" asked Mother. "Yes. It's claimed here that when trying to peacefully negotiate with Eddard Stark and Ashera Dayne at Harrenhal, they attacked them and tried to murder King Rhaegar before Eddard Stark was taken prisoner and Ashera Dayne escaped," said Willers. Margaery instantly noticed something was wrong. "What do you mean by it is claimed, brother?" she asked. At that, Willers turned to grandmother. "I received a raven from one of my spies at Harrenhal. It was the Targaryens and Lannisters who attacked first, insulting the Wents for breaking guest rights, after failing to convince the Starks to bend the knee. Eddard Stark was backstabbed in the leg by Jaime Lannister and Ashera Dayne was to be passed around Rhaegar's soldiers before the timely intervention of a man known only as the Knight of the Blue Hood. And this is the royalty that Margaery is to marry into. They broke another family's guest right in their own castle and attacked the Starks and wanted to pass around the Queen of the North around as though she was a common whore. This will be disastrous for the realm." "If Eddard Stark is imprisoned, who is leading the armies of the North?" asked Loras. "That would be his eldest son, Prince Prydain Stark," replied Willers before turning to grandmother. "What is there to know about Prydain Stark, grandmother?" Willers asked. "Unfortunately I don't have many spies in the North. And what I do know about him is that he is married to Talisa Magai of Volantis, daughter of Volantis' current Triarch, and he has a daughter with her called Lyria Stark. But like I said, very little," said grandmother. "Has there been any letters from your father?" asked mother. "Yes. He says that we are to call the banners to war at Highgarden and prepare to march on the north," replied Willers. "Finally. A chance of glory and restoring the honor of House Tyrell that was lost after the Battle of Greywater. Jaime X. How is it that 1,000 men failed so miserably in capturing a king and queen, protected by a paltry 50? Father demanded as Jaime sat opposite him in his solar. Because they fought fiercely and the attack by the Knight of the Blue Hood took us all by surprise. Especially when he seemed to know Harrenhal all too well and planned his escape very well, Jaime replied. And what of Eddard Stark? Asked Father. A prisoner in the Red Keep. Though with the way that Cersei is having him treated, how long he remains alive, I don't know, said Jaime with a shrug. Treating him as a common criminal is as stupid as it is insulting, Tyrion pointed out. The realm knows him to be a traitor, Jaime replied. A traitor who dealt deadly blows to the Iron Throne. And an honorable man at that. Does Cersei honestly think that people will believe that the Honorable Eddard Stark would break guest right and try to murder she and Rhaegar? Father added. I didn't realize you had so much respect for Eddard Stark, Jaime replied with raised brows. He built his kingdom from being one of the poorest in Westeros into one of the wealthiest, most powerful and most advanced. Then he won 3 great battles against the full might of more than half of Westeros. And now, what was supposed to be an easy task, so easy that even your Uncle Aemon could have handled it, was wrecked because of madness. Madness and stupidity, said Father. If only Cersei and Rhaegar were hearing these words rather than me, Jaime thought as there was a knock on the door. My lord. A raven from King's Landing, said Maester Crelan. Enter, Maester Crelan, said Father. The Maester of Casterly Rock passed a letter to Father. It would seem that our king is ordering for our armies to all march for the Crown Lands to fight as one enormous army, said Father before putting the letter down. Is that what the armies of the West will do? Asked Jaime. No. At least not yet. We will not repeat the mistakes of the last war. We will gather all men we can before we march for the Crown Lands, said Father before turning to Tyrion. Whilst I am gone, you, Melita and High Polar are to rule in Casterly Rock, said Father. Tyrion looked shocked at what he had just said. Jaime was just as shocked. Why is he doing this to Tyrion? Me. Why me? Asked Tyrion. You are my son. And you have been eager for the chance to prove yourself. This is that very chance. Jaime left Father's solar and looked for Melita, Loron and High Polar. He saw High Polar sewing with her friends Jane Westerling, Jaime's cousin Joylan Imir, Leo Lefford's sister Alysanne and Forley Preston's daughter Marla. And Loron was sparring in the yard with his own friends, Reynold Westerling, Oliver Sarsfield, Kenoth Lydon and Jaime's cousin Tyrk Lannek. Jaime found Melita writing a letter. Is that for Ashmark? Jaime asked. Yes. Mother and father are insistent that they see more of their grandchildren, she replied with a smile. Well, I think that your father will soon be seeing more of Loron, said Jaime. She looked up at him and took her attention away from her letter. Jaime, please tell me that this isn't what I think it is, she said fearfully. Jaime just nodded. Jaime, he is too young to go to war. He is 7 and 10. That's not at all young. I was younger when I joined the King's Guard, he pointed out. He is our only son, she begged. I know. But, if he is to be Lord of Casterly Rock one day, he must know what war is really like and what it means to lead men onto the battlefield, said Jaime as he reached out and held her hands. When will you go to war? Melita asked, as Jaime saw how teary her eyes had become. A week from now, we will march for the Golden Tooth, he replied. Is it true that Rhaegar and Cersei broke guest right at Harrenhal and that you took part? She asked. Only because father ordered for me to go, to ensure it is done properly. Yes, I was there. And yes, our king and queen broke House Went's guest right. Osferth Went was very furious as we left and said that that was the last time that Harrenhal is used for anything by House Targaryen or House Lannister, said Jaime. I can still remember how disappointed in Rhaegar and in Oswell he looked. I have never seen Oswell so down ever since Catelyn Tully's body was given to her family. How long will this war last? She asked. If it was Eddard Stark, I would have said a long time. But this will be his son, Prydain, who knows nothing of war. He won't last long against all of the armies of the Crown Lands, the Westerlands and the Reach, Jaime said, trying to assure her whilst hugging her and kissing her. Elia 9. All right, this is it. The proof we have been looking for a long time. Rhaegar has finally gone completely mad, said Oberyn as he, Elia and Doran sat in Doran's solar with Oberyn, Nymeria, Tyon, Arianne, Quentin, Tristan, Rhaenys and Aegon. Mad or not, all of his armies will gather at King's Landing, and his armies in the west and the Reach will assemble, as well as their allies on the Riverlands, the Stormlands and the Vale, said Doran. And they will march on the north, as well as sending their fleets, potentially leaving King's Landing unguarded, Arianne pointed out. True. But we mustn't underestimate Rhaegar. Mad, he may be, but he has allies who know what war is like, and he has people in the capital whom would know that leaving the capital unguarded would be very unwise, said Doran. So, we sit for them to leave King's Landing and march on the north, asked Aegon. Elia noticed how Nymeria looked worried at the idea of them marching on the north. Dear Aegon, in spite of the Northerners refusing to bow to your father or to you, they are still our allies. We cannot leave them without aid, said Elia. But what do we do now? We have almost no spies in King's Landing. Especially not in the Red Keep, said Rhaenys. Oberyn smirked as she said that. Fear not, beloved niece. Your uncle and I have considered this. Oberyn, Nymeria, Tyen and Sarala shall travel to King's Landing in disguise and learn what information they can and send as much information as is possible to Sunspear and to Winterfell, said Oberyn. Are you ready for that? Rhaenys asked her cousins. Yes, cousin. For you and for Aegon, we would do anything, Oberyn said loyally. Good. They won't expect women as spies. Assuming they spy in roles that they are believable as. What will you disguise yourselves as? Quentin asked. I will be a stable hand. Nymeria shall be some lady in court. Tyen shall be a scepter. And Sarala shall be a sailor and have her ship docked at Blackwater Harbour, said Oberyn. And whilst you are in King's Landing, will you attempt to free the King of the North? Asked Tristan. Yes, we will try. And we will not be alone, said Tyen. What do you mean? Asked Arianne. Wait and hear about it when we are successful, cousin, said Sarala with a grin. Arthur. I was so happy to read his letter from Riverrun that he and Ash are safe. But, to break Eddard out of the Black Cells, just when war is now declared. Even with my nieces spying in King's Landing, it may not be enough. Jon 17. What the fuck were they thinking? Jon was furious the moment that he had heard about the so-called Rhaegar's folly. Even if they had succeeded in capturing both Eddard Stark and Ashara Dayne and forced them to swear fealty, the backlash the Iron Throne shall receive will stain House Targaryen for years to come. But whilst Eddard Stark was a prisoner in the Black Cells, they didn't have Ashara Dayne, and she had escaped thanks to the mysterious Knight of the Blue Hood, whom even Varys didn't know the name of. Jon led the small council sessions whilst Rhaegar was healing and resting in bed. What news from Walder Free, Lord Varys? Asked Jon, feeling slightly disgusted at the mere mention of the creepy Riverlord, whom disgusted Jon in many ways, from marrying girls young enough to be his great-granddaughter to not giving a damn when a few of his sons and grandsons had been killed in the fighting in the last war. Lord Free says that the northern armies are assembling at Moat Cailin. But his spies haven't figured out how many their numbers are, said Lord Varys. Whatever their numbers, we shouldn't underestimate them like we had in the last war, advised Sir Kevan. Nor shall we, my lords. Once all armies loyal to the crown arrive in the Crown Lands, then we can begin planning for the invasion, said Jon. And what of the king's health? Asked Richard. Pycelle assures me that his grace will survive, but shall be bedridden for several moons to ensure total recovery, for Eddard Stark's dagger not only wounded him, it also damaged his ribs, said Jon. Though mentioning that reminded Jon of the last time he had gone to see Rhaegar. He had noticed how annoyed Jaehaerys was when he found out that his father would survive his wound. Will the Crown Prince take part in the fighting? Asked Miles. I have spoken at length with the Queen on this matter. Whilst he is certainly old enough, Her Grace is under the impression that this war would not last long enough to warrant for the Crown Prince to fight, said Jon. He spoke diplomatically to avoid offending Cersei's uncle Kevan. But he was surprised when he saw that he was angry, clearly at his niece. I will speak with her, my lord hand. In times of war, the armies, the small folk and the nobles of the realm will need to see that House Targaryen is united, and that without his grace leading our armies to war, the Crown Prince's presence on the battlefield will be sure to bring good morale to our armies and be good for the small folk and nobility to see their future king, said Sir Kevan. Thank you, Sir Kevan, Jon replied with a grateful smile. But will that arrogant and power-coveting bitch listen to her own uncle? How long will it take for our armies to all link up in the Crown Lands? Asked Miles. 1 or 2 moons, Sir Miles. Tywin Lannister has promised 75,000 men. Lord Tyrell has promised 100,000 men. And we have 15,000 in the Crown Lands, possibly an additional 5,000. Prince Viserys and Princess Daenerys' reinforcements number 63,000. And we have numerous loyalists across the realm, in the Riverlands, the Stormlands and the Vale, Jon explained. But not in Dorne, asked Mace Tyrell. Unfortunately not, Lord Tyrell said Jon with a sad shake of his head. Our allies in the Riverlands, Stormlands and Vale number at least 40,000 fighting men, if not more, once they have gathered their troops, said Richard. But my little birds say that those numbers won't include House Went, said Varys. What? Truly, Lord Varys, asked Jon. But House Went has always been loyal to the throne. I am afraid so, Lord Hand. Osferth Went has been furious ever since the arrest of Eddard Stark and the attempted arrest of Ashara Stark. Apparently he has said that is the last time that House Went is insulted by the Targaryens. Whilst I am furious that he would not take up arms against the enemies of the crown and his king, I understand why he would be so furious. It shouldn't have happened. Yes, I wanted Eddard Stark to pay for his crimes and treasons, but imprisoning him as though he was a common criminal in the Black Cells is not at all right. And guest rights were broken at Harrenhal. No matter what tales they try and tell, the world will always know it was Rhaegar and Cersei whom had done it, and it will forever be a dark mark on his great reign. Lord Varys, is there any news on whom the Knight of the Blue Hood is? Asked Richard. A few of my birds have theories, but not much evidence, Lord Lunmouth. I have several suspects in mind. But, alas, I have no solid proof, he replied. Solid? Nothing solid. But you have some ideas as to who the mystery man is? Asked Jon. Indeed, Lord Hand. I had at first suspected that it was perhaps one of Eddard Stark's southern friends from the Stormlands or the Vale. But my birds say that they were all at home at the time. As for the Riverlands, there is nothing to suggest that it was from a Riverlord disgruntled at the throne such as the Mallisters. But interestingly enough, Lord Edmure Tully and Sir Brynden the Blackfish were both absent from Riverrun on the day itself, he explained. Brynden the Blackfish? Of course. How could I have not seen that before? So, who could it have been to have slaughtered so many knights and soldiers and killed Selyn? Lord Edmure or the Blackfish? Asked Richard. The Blackfish, surely. He is one of the best soldiers in the realm, said Sir Kevan. True. But he is also an old man. And stories are that Lord Edmure is far from a dunce with a blade, Miles pointed out. Well, my lords, just when I had thought that it was them, they appeared to have good alibis for themselves. The Blackfish had left Riverrun a few days prior to go fishing with 3 empty fishing boats. On his return in the evening, an hour after the Northern Queen's escape, he had returned from his fishing trip with all fishing boats brimming with fish and no others on board the boats other than his own men and fishermen. As for Lord Edmure, he was travelling to a place called the Muddy Hall, to negotiate a peace between Jon Osbracken and Tytos Blackwood after their respective families' long-standing feud almost came to violence, explained Lord Varys. Miles chuckled at what Edmure Tully was doing on the day. I don't see why he would even try to bother. The Blackwoods and the Brackens have been beating each other bloody since long before Aegon the Conqueror set foot on Westeros, he jested. If not either of the Tullys, then who in the Seven Hells is the Knight of the Blue Hood? A knock on the door interrupted the meeting. Lord Hand, His Grace the King summons you, said Sir Luwin. I shall see him now, Sir Luwin, said Jon before he stood up. We'll talk further later, my lords, Jon said before leaving the small council. He was escorted by Sir Luwin to Rhaegar's chambers, where Jon saw how in pain Rhaegar was. Because he hadn't been wearing armor, and Eddard Stark was brought directly before him, he was lucky to still be alive, remarked Pycelle. The dagger had eviscerated him from just below his shoulder to the middle of his belly. Jon, Rhaegar said as he drank something, which he appeared to hate the taste of. Your Grace, Jon replied, bowing his head. What news from the small council? He asked. The loyal armies of the realm shall meet in the Crown Lands by the end of next moon, Your Grace, he explained. Rhaegar nodded, seemingly glad that he was hearing good news. Has Varys found out who the Knight of the Blue Hood is? He asked. No, Your Grace. He did think it was either Edmure Tully or the Blackfish for a time. But both men had good alibis for the day of the attempted arrest of the traitors, John explained. Damn. Wait, what alibis? Roriger asked. The Blackfish was returning from fishing that day, and with only a few fishing boats. As for Edmure Tully, he was trying to settle a peace between two warring bannermen of his, the Blackwoods and the Brackens. No matter how hard my house has tried, those two always find a way to hate each other and fight it out, Roriger remarked. Your Grace, in your state, shall I assume the role of regent until you are healed and ready to resume your duties? Asked John. No. Cersei has already been named regent. She promised that she'll ensure that the northern armies will be destroyed before I am healed and will sit back on the Iron Throne, he replied. What? What has that Lannister idiot done? What in the seven hells does she know about ruling or about proper governance? She's never once attended a session of the small council. Gods, she works fast. Apologies, Your Grace, but is that wise? She has never been on the small council and she knows little, if anything, of warfare, advised John. She is the Queen, John. You will follow her orders as you would follow mine, and see a bitter end to the northern traitors, he replied, in pain. John saw just how much it hurt him to speak from how the wound had appeared to have hit his ribs and possibly lungs. Of course, Your Grace, said John. John took his leave from Roriger as he thought about what may happen with Cersei as regent for her husband. Will she break the betrothal with the Tyrells? I'll need to prevent that from happening. Knowing her as well as I do, she would do it whilst under the impression that we do not need the Tyrells or their armies and fleets and that her father alone could destroy the north. Lord Hand. The Queen summons you to court, said Sir Barristan. What is she doing now? As they walked to the throne room, John saw Viserys and Sir Jonathan Hordare standing before Cersei, whom was seated on the Iron Throne. Don't get too comfortable there. I vow that I shall do all I can to have you removed from the throne and for Roriger to take his place back there sooner rather than later. Prince Viserys. You shall lead the armies of the Crown Lands and join with the loyal armies of the Riverlands and secure the neck for our armies before they join together in the Crown Lands, she ordered. Viserys glanced at Sir Jonathan Hor, who simply nodded at him. It will be done, my queen. I shall leave on the morrow with the army and with Aerys Aulus, he said. Will she have him murdered on the march to the neck? No. Right now, she needs him. She isn't that mad. At least I hope that she isn't. Chapter 38, A Blessing from the Old Gods. Chapter text. Prydain 8. You shall have Maester Jellimond and Veon here to advise you, said Prydain as he held Lyria. But what about your mother? Asked Talisa. She wrote that she'll rest a while longer in Riverrun before Lord Tully has her escorted to Seaguard, and from there, the Mallisters will sail her to Flint's Finger, explained Prydain. How long will this war last? Talisa asked. I know not. But I know that it will be long if the dragons they possess are as fully grown as the stories might suggest, he replied. What has the Citadel of White Harbor said? That we use ballista bolts made of weirwood and coated with sap from heart trees, he explained. And may the gods strike down those monsters before they burn my people or my men. My prince, Mikken has arrived, and with your order, said Maester Jellimond. Good. Let's see if he got all of it correctly, Prydain thought as he walked to the great hall and found Mikken and two of his sons carrying a large chest. My prince. We have the armor you ordered, he said with a bow. Very good. Show me, said Prydain. They opened the chest and Prydain looked at the armor with awe. It was a breastplate with a snarling and crowned direwolf insignia on it. Boiled leathers and chainmail covered the arms and legs. And the silver-colored helmet was in the shape of a direwolf's head. Magnificent. This brilliant work indeed, Mikken. Well done, said Prydain. My thanks, my prince, said Mikken. The three men helped Prydain don the armor, and as he put the helm on, he remembered what the woman told him in the cave. Focus all of your anger until it becomes your strength, he remembered. He thought about father and how he was being treated as though he was a common criminal in the fucking southern capital. And as he felt his hands turn to fists and how his brows pointed downwards in a hateful fury, he could feel himself change into the first transformation. But he couldn't stop himself from twitching. Are you all right, my prince? Asked one of Mikken's sons. I. Just trying to get used to wearing this, he replied as he stretched his arms out, and whilst using this transformation, he could feel he was lighter, as though the armor felt like it was no different than the clothes he was wearing only a few minutes ago. And as for his helm, because of how it was shaped like a direwolf's head, it hid how his face had transformed. Good, very good indeed, Prydain thought as he calmed himself, and he could feel his anger subside and feel how the armor had felt heavier than before, especially with his helm on his head. A very good fit, Mikan. Thank you, said Prydain as he took his helm off. They helped him remove his new armor, and he walked back to his chambers to find Talisa there and Lyria gone. Where is Lyria? Asked Prydain. Old Nan is reading him some stories, she replied as she walked up to Prydain and hugged him hard. Prydain leant down slightly and kissed her hard on the lips. You will be safe in Winterfell. No southern army or fleet can get this far without the whole of the north finding out. And even if they could, then the mountain clans can swoop down and destroy them all, said Prydain. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about you, she said before letting him go. I'm so scared of you going to war. I never wanted either you or for Lyria to know what war is like. I just want you to be safe and here with me and with Lyria, she said as she reached for his face with both hands. I will be fine. I promise, he said before he lifted her up and carried her to bed. We will both be fine. As will Lyria, he said as he lay her down on the bed and kissed her lips hard and wrapped his arms around her. I love you so much, Talisa whispered Prydain. And I love you, she said as she stroked his face and then sat up to take off her fur-lined dress whilst Prydain took off his tunic and threw it away. Have you changed? Talisa asked. What? You just seem so different. You are stronger, far more muscular and tougher, she said as she traced her finger on his abdominal muscles. She cannot know. If she knew, what if she thought me a monster? I do not intend to be like this forever. This power is incredible and a worthy gift from the gods. But that woman was right. I do not want our children to grow up as werewolves. I don't want them to become this if they never wanted that. Perhaps the gods blessed me, he asked with a smile as he pulled down his breeches. Talisa giggled before she said, well, they certainly blessed you with a very big and strong spear. Prydain marveled at her beautiful body, her breasts which had enlarged since giving birth to Lyria. Her body was smooth and slender, and Prydain leant towards her and kissed her as he entered her. Oh! Oh! Prydain, oh, by the gods, she yelled out as she wrapped her legs around his waist and pulled him further in. Prydain kissed her neck as she moaned for all the castle to hear before his mouth ventured further south. He kissed and licked her nipples as he found her breasts. Oh, Prydain, oh yes. Oh. Oh, gods. Fuck, she yelled before Prydain quietened her when he kissed her, during which, she bit his lips. Harder. Harder. Yes, oh, my Prydain. More, she screamed. Fuck. I'm going to spend my seed soon, he realized. Prydain pulled out of her and ran his tongue around where he had entered her and could feel her shiver and her fingers run through his hair as he licked and kissed her. Oh, gods. Fuck. Oh, that feels so good. Oh yes. Yes, she said loudly. Prydain turned her around, with her ass hanging above the bed and his cock upright and hard. Gods, that is fucking tight. Talisa seemed to feel the same through her screams and moans. Gods. Oh, my Prydain. Oh, that is so fucking good, she screamed as Prydain's hands fondled her breasts from behind, eliciting even louder moans and screams. When he realized that he was very close to giving her his seed again, he pulled out, and as she panted in exhaustion as she turned to face him, Prydain leant over and kissed her. As they kissed, she wrapped her arms around him before she grabbed his cock and rubbed her clit with it. Oh, gods, she said. Prydain entered one last time, thrusting hard as he panted and kissed her lips and her breasts. Oh, Talisa. I'm getting there, he shouted. Do it. Come in, Prydain, she said as she grabbed him by his back, her nails digging deep into his skin, and her legs wrapped around his waist as she pulled him in. Talisa moaned loud as she felt his seed inside her. They both lay down in bed, hugging each other and kissing each other. Gods, I love you so much, she said as she gently stroked his face. And I love you too, he replied before he kissed her again and pulled her toward him, and she rested her head upon his chest. Talisa 7. It was hard for Talisa to say goodbye to Prydain. She held on to him as she hugged and kissed him in their chambers. Come back. Promise that you won't leave me alone in this world, she said. I promise. I love you, Talisa. And I will come back, he replied as he stroked her face. Talisa picked up Lyria laying in her bassinet and walked alone to the great hall and then to the courtyard, where she stood with Maester Gelimond and Veon. Prydain joined them, dressed in his new suit of armor. It had a beauty to it, but was hard, strong. However, it was the helm that made him look fearful. It was shaped like a giant wolf's head. I'm sure that it would make many a southern soldier frightened on the battlefield. This day we march to war against the forever damned southerners who dare to trick and imprison our king like he was a common criminal. But this insult and all other insults will not be forgiven. They will pay for each and every insult with the destruction of their armies. They think that because of their dragons that they are invincible. But we will prove them wrong. Northerners, do you stand with me? Cheers and chants of "I, all hail the North, for King Eddard, justice for our king, and long live the Starks," could be heard all over the courtyard and throughout Winterfell. Prydain drew ice from its scabbard and lifted it up high for them all to see. The North marches for the battlefield and for the death of the wolf prey, and that the idiot Southerners learn that the North will never ever serve their damned iron chair. Not now and not any day from now. Talisa noticed how Arya beamed with pride at her brother as she climbed onto her horse and rode with Prydain as they led the Winterfell army through the streets of the Winter City. As they marched, the people cheered for them and for the soldiers. Gods, keep them safe, and bring Prydain back to me and to Lyria, Talisa thought as she held Lyria close to her chest. Talisa walked back inside the great keep and walked to Eddard's Solar. Inside, after leaving Lyria in the care of old Nan, she met with Maester Gelimond in Eddard's Solar. "What would you have of me, my princess?" he asked. "I would send a raven to my father in Volantis," she replied. "Are you certain that he would send troops to join with us, my princess?" he asked. "I am. My brother Joranos has always been eager for battle and for chances of glory," said Talisa. "We would need to write to Lord Marndale to prepare for their arrival at White Harbor, my princess," he pointed out. "We shall write to Volantis first. The North cannot outfight all armies of the South at once. We will need the tiger cloaks of Volantis if we are to stand any chance. And we cannot use the very same tactics we had used in the last war. The Southerners will be on guard now and know not to underestimate the North," she explained. She took a quill and an ink pot and started to write a letter for father. "My beloved father. As you would have heard by now, the North is at war with the Targaryens of the South once again. Because my good father was unjustly imprisoned by the Targaryens, Prydain leads the armies of the North to fight the Targaryens and their many armies. I would not write to you for help unless I didn't think it was absolutely necessary. We are outnumbered at least 5-1 and our enemy has 3 growing dragons. I pray that this finds you in good health and that you will deliver a promising reply. Yours sincerely, Talisa." Interlude 12. Harry Lloyd looks unrecognizable 11 years after playing Viserys Targaryen in Game of Thrones. Viserys Targaryen, Harry Lloyd. Viserys and his army camped on the outskirts of Castle Stokeworth. Lady Tanda Stokeworth had very kindly offered that he and his commanders stay for the time being in the castle. But Viserys knew her ultimate intentions were to find a husband for her overweight and dim-witted daughter Lollys. "I don't plan on getting married anytime soon. I'd rather have some land to be inherited by my children before I ever get married. But if all goes according to plan once this war is over, then that Lannister bitch and her children will be exiled from King's Landing and Rhaenys and Aegon can return to his rightful place." Viserys sat in his tent drinking from his goblet, a beautiful one decorated with 3-headed dragons made of rubies, gifted to him by his host in Pentos, Magister Illyrio Patis. "My prince, a messenger has arrived from the capital," said Sir Jonnet Hoare standing guard outside. "Show him in," Sir Jonnet Hoare said Viserys as he stood up. The messenger bowed his head and offered the letter to him. "From the hand of the king, my prince," he said. "Ah, Jon Connington. What news does he bring?" Viserys hoped that Rhaegar's wound hadn't been infected and had killed him. If he dies and Jaehaerys becomes king, House Targaryen will descend into darkness and he will treat everyone in the Red Keep as his plaything and torture and murder to his heart's content. And then the realm will drift into further chaos, with the Arins, Baratheons and Tullys fighting for independence. He broke the seal on the letter and opened it. Viserys passed the messenger a silver stag before he started to read it. "Go to my tent to the left and have some food and drink, goodman, you've earned it," he said. "You are most kind, my prince." "You have my thanks," he said with another bow before he took his leave. To Prince Viserys. "My prince, I write to tell you that my spies in Sunspear have brought back promising reports regarding the rightful crown prince. All of them say that the young prince is well learned, is respectful to all peoples from commoners to the highborn. It is evident that your former good sister has taught her children well as she has raised them. Once you have returned from the war with the Northerners, we should discuss how we can remove Cersei Lannister from the regency and plan for the return of Aegon and Rhaenys. Until then, I shall keep my eye on Prince Aegon and wait for your approval to send word to Sunspear to bring House Martell into our plans. Yours faithfully, Jon Connington." Good. Very good. I always knew that Elia was a very good mother and an excellent queen. A pox on Rhaegar's beloved prophesies. First he fears for the undead beyond the wall. And now he fears for the wolfmen, or werewolves, of the north. As much as I wish for the north to rejoin the Seven Kingdoms, Rhaegar needs to get his head out of his books and scrolls and to realize that he is the king and not a scholar. Viserys nodded one last time after rereading the letter before putting it into a burning brazier and rubbed his hands together as he held his hands above the flames. "My prince. The loyal armies of the Riverlands are here," said Sir Jonathan Hoare. "Excellent. Now our armies should number 40,000. And once Drold Grafton arrives with the loyalist armies of the Vale, then all should be well and our armies will grow to 50,000. Viserys welcomed the loyalist riverlords in his tent, but a noticeable absentee was Osferth Went. "As much as I want the North to rejoin the kingdoms, arresting Eddard and Ashara Stark and treating him like a common criminal and her like a common whore, was a fucking stupid idea. Only one that Cersei Lannister could have come up with. And of all places, they chose Harrenhal, an accursed place where bad things have happened, especially to House Targaryen." Lord Raymond Dare eagerly asked, "My prince, we understand that you bring your dragon, Aerys Ollys, with you for the war." "I do, my lord. I do." "Come, I will introduce you all," said Viserys, at which they eagerly followed. Viserys led them to a large enclosure and in the middle, was Aerys Ollys, now large enough to be ridden on and fed regularly with sheep and cattle. Viserys had ridden on him twice now and was glad of the opportunity to speak his mother tongue of Valyrian to it. The Riverlords stared in awe at Aerys Ollys. "Is he fully grown, my prince?" asked Sir Quincy Cox. "A few more years perhaps, Sir Quincy. But it would take perhaps an entire century before he will be as large as Balerion," replied Viserys as Aerys Ollys burned a herd of living cattle before devouring half of them in one large gulp. But as Viserys mentioned Balerion the dragon, he remembered how his niece Rhaenys had a kitten called Balerion. "Rhaegar, you fucking fool, you let your goddamned pride and your Lannister bitch of a wife blind you to your own children. Rhaenys and Aegon were lovely children and they are true Targaryens. True Targaryens whom mother adored, but despised Jaehaerys for all of his pathetic acts of cruelty. I pray that Daenerys, Jon Connington and I will succeed in bringing peace to the realm where Rhaegar has failed and to ensure that the true heir to the Iron Throne takes his rightful place as opposed to the hellspawn that is Jaehaerys." Chapter 39, The Truth of War. Chapter text. Prydain 9. Whilst resting in the chambers Ulrich had gifted him for whilst they waited for the rest of the northern armies to arrive, Prydain looked out at the full moon. "Just from looking at the moon and basking in its light, I feel stronger, like I can conquer the world," he thought as he raised his arms and made fists and looked up and down from his knuckles to his shoulder blades. He picked up the large solitary rock he had earlier found out in the courtyard. He held it in the palm of his hand before he tightened his grip and could feel it crack before he threw it up in the air and punched it. He marveled at how it burst into tiny fragments and pieces before falling out of the windowsill and down onto the courtyard. Will I be able to give up these powers when the war is over? What if I kept them in case we were invaded again? But then he remembered his promise he made to the woman and to himself. No, I made a vow. I must honor it. For the safety of the North, my people and my family, I will retain these powers until the time comes that I must rid myself of such powers, before they corrupt me forever. Sleeping was difficult. He missed being at home in Winterfell, and he missed Talisa and Lyria. True, he was used to life on the march from the numerous marches he had taken part in, but this was war he was marching to, not a simple march around the north that would end in coming home. The next morning, the last forces to join the army had arrived, from beyond the wall and from Skagos. With all bannermen of the north assembled in the Children's Tower, Prydain held council. My lords, Prydain called for attention, but only a few turned to him. My lords and ladies, he boomed. This time they had all turned to face him. My thanks, he said before continuing and looking at the map of the 6 kingdoms. Now, we are faced with the question of what do we do now? Do we wait for the southern armies to march to the neck and besiege Moat Cailin? Asked Prydain. Aye, my prince. That's what we did in the last war, and the southerners lost all the same, boomed the great Jon Umber. That is so, Lord Umber. However, I think that the southerners will suspect that we will do exactly that. They would wait until all of their armies are joined before marching on us. I think we should fight them differently, said Prydain. There was some grumbling and uncertainty amongst the lords of the north. What do you suggest, my prince? Asked Roose Bolton. That we cross the neck and into the south. They will think that we will wait for them to come to us. But, if we allow them to unite their armies, they will outnumber us 4-1, maybe even 5-1. However, if take the fight to them and destroy their armies, one by one, we will save the lives of our men, our people back home and scare the scum. We will make them shit themselves by invading the south and bleed them dry before they get the chance to bleed the north. And never again will these fucking southern shits think to invade the north again. Some of the northern lords, such as Willis Marndale, Roose Bolton, Jorah Mormont, Mance Rayder nodded as if they understood his plan and saw the merit in it. What say you, my lords? Asked Prydain. The great Jon was the first to speak. Aye, my prince. If it makes the southerners shit themselves and keeps the north safe and protects our people, I say that we do it. Your plan sounds good, my prince. But, where do we start? Asked Jorah Mormont. Our allies in the Riverlands say that the Wolf Prey's brother, Viserys Targaryen, is marching an army of 50,000 towards the neck to establish a base before the rest of the armies march on the neck, Lord Mormont said Prydain, before pointing at Duskendale on the map. That report was from yesterday, when they were situated at Duskendale. If we can get as far into the Riverlands as possible and take them by surprise, then we can make the rest of them panic and make stupid decisions that will cost them victory after victory. The northern lords all agreed to the plan, and soon after they had lunch, they began the march across onto the neck, where 5 and 10 years ago, the northern armies had crushed the armies of the south twice. Many northern lords boasted to their sons and daughters of how many southerners they had killed in these battles as they pointed at the battlefields. Whilst camping in the neck, Prydain found himself in a forest whilst walking around. He spotted a lone tree that looked close to collapsing on its side. This lone tree was thrice as tall as small Jon Umber and thicker than a pillar in the Great Keep. Prydain grabbed it with both hands and ripped it from its roots. He picked it up with one hand before throwing it into the farthest wood he could see. By the gods, I am strong. But then he turned and looked at the northern army, an army which he was to lead into battle. He had marched with many of them and knew the names of all northern nobles and their sons and daughters. But now he was to fight alongside them in war against the Wolf Prey and his many southern armies. Gods, guide us as we march on the southerners to protect the north from their fucking ways that do endanger the north. Loras v. Because Daikon was now no longer his squire, Loras had a new squire, Mathis Rowan's youngest son Geriant. Daikon had not been knighted, though Loras had wanted to knight him. But no, he knew very well of his father's opinions of knighting those who had earned it. Randyll Tarly wanted his son to earn his knighthood in battle rather than, as he put it, hitting some men off a horse with some swaddling sticks. Good luck, Daikon. And when battle comes with the Northerners, I have no doubt that you will impress your father so that he will want you to be knighted, Loras complimented as Daikon had left to join his father and the army of Horn Hill. Thank you, Sir Loras. Though I think that I won't be earning as much glory as you will be, he replied modestly. Loras looked on in wonder with Geriant Rowan at the great army of the Reach as it marched on the Rose Road towards King's Landing. An army of 100,000 men, Loras thought with amazement. Has there ever been such an army in Westeros history, Sir Loras? Asked Geriant. No, Geriant. Not even Egon the Conqueror or Daeron the young dragon had such armies, Loras replied. And what glory we shall win when we fight the Northerners and defeat Prydain Stark and avenge the defeat of Greywater. Geriant called the voice of his squire's lord father. Loras turned around to see Mathis Rowan looking on at them. Father, said Geriant, bowing his head to him. Continue riding on. This war won't be any quicker if you idle around and gawk at the army. You won't earn any of your supposed glories by sitting around on your horses and watching the march, said the Lord of Goldengrove with stern disapproval of the knight to whom his youngest son was squired to. Suitably chastised, Geriant nodded at his father in shame. I'm sorry, father, he replied. Don't apologize. If you are to be a knight of House Rowan one day, you should behave like one and not a simpering and preening peacock who wins a few jousts and thinks he knows all there is to know about war, snapped his father before he rode away on his horse. Geriant looked down in shame at the ground. Forgive me, Sir Loras, he managed to say, though Loras could almost hear him try to fight back tears. There's nothing to forgive. I am just as eager as you are. Your father is wrong about this. We aren't affecting the men marching, said Loras, patting him on the shoulder with a sympathetic smile. I should talk to that cruel bastard that is Lord Rowan. What in the seven hells is wrong with him that he should be so cruel to his own son, never mind the fact that he is my squire. Father always said that Mathis Rowan was many things, such as unforgiving, hard and blunt. But to be so hard on his son, that is just cruel. They camped that night on the outskirts of the castle of Dunstonbury, home to Garlon, his wife Leonette and their newly born daughter Alisanne. Just as Loras had left Geriant to clean his armor and sharpen his sword, he had gone to find and confront his father. He found him conversing with Randil Tarly outside of the Great Hall. Randil Tarly had left to go back inside when Loras decided to approach the Lord of Goldengrove. My Lord Rowan, said Loras, bowing his head to him. Sir Loras, he replied bluntly. Might I have a word, asked Loras. If you so wish, he shrugged as he crossed his arms. I do. Then, what do you want to speak about? Is this to do with my son, he asked with a raised brow. Yes, it is. Geriant is a good lad and is eager to fight for his house and for the Reach. There should be no reason as to denigrate him as such, and in front of your own men, Loras said firmly. But he just raised his other brow before both brows fell and turned to a frown. Are you trying to tell me how I can and cannot raise my own son, he demanded. I am not telling you, my lord, nor am I in any position to give you a command. But, as a knight looking out for his squire, I would ask that you refrain from such talks in public, said Loras, thinking that the request for it to not be in public was reasonable enough. He scoffed as he lowered his arms to his sides. You're a lot like your lord father in his younger days, Sir Loras. Young, brave, handsome and possessing the air of leadership. But like your father, you are also soft and timid. If it came to battle, how would my Geriant fare against the Northerners? Aerwin Oakert lost her youngest son, brave Sir Oris, to a Northerners' axe at Greywater. I lost several friends there. And I lost my brother Garth at Moat Cailin. Fuck, I didn't know that. What the fuck were you thinking, Loras? Do you think that your father fought gloriously against the Northerners at Greywater? I know he did, said Loras firmly. Really? Did he tell you how the Northerners tricked him into directly confronting them? That we charged into walls of spears and pikes, infantry and cavalry both. And as they charged and impaled themselves, Northern infantry flanked us on both sides, slaughtering many infantry. And what about when we tried to kill the flankers? Lord Caswell was cut down as he tried to lead an attack to defeat the flankers. And did he tell you, that when we heard a frightening war horn, Northern cavalry smashed into our unprepared flanks, all because our scouts had spotted the Northern army, but were too stupid to not wonder where their cavalry were? Forgive me, my lord. I did not know, said Loras. No, you didn't. Now, on your way, Sir Loras. I want to hear good things about my son, he sternly said. As Loras started to leave, he noticed Randil Tarly had been watching, but had done and said nothing. All that father had told me about Greywater was a half-truth. I should talk to Garlon about this. Loras found Garlon holding Alisanne in his arms as he held up a doll for her. Dolly. Dolly, she said excitedly. Yes, my little Rose. Your dolly, he said with a beaming smile as he passed her doll to her. He looked up at Loras. Look. There's your Uncle Loras. Do you want to show him your doll? Garland asked. Yes. Uncle Laura. This my doll. Her name Alara, she said. She has to be the cutest little thing in the world, Loras thought as he knelt down to face her. She is such a beautiful little princess. Just like you, Alysanne said Loras with a beaming smile. And where is my little angel? Loras turned around to see Leonette joining them. Alysanne ran to her mother and Leonette picked her up. Now, say good night to your father and to Uncle Loras, said Leonette. Good night, father. Good night, Uncle Loras, said Alysanne. Good night, little princess, said Loras with a wave as her father kissed her good night. She has to be the most adorable little girl in the world, said Loras. Yes, she is, said Garland before his elated smile turned to a sad frown. But, I hate that we are marching for the north. Loras asked Garland about the Battle of Greywater and told him what Mathis Rowan had told him. Garland nodded as he finished. Yes, that's all true, said Garland. So, father lied. No, I think that the truth was hard for father to bear. It hurts him that thousands are dead because he was too reckless. Eddard Stark at least was honorable enough to return our wounded and dead to us, without ransom. But, Loras, you need to know that there is no glory in war. No true glory anyway, he said. How can you say that? Loras asked. All great lords and kings of the past earned great glories on the battlefield. All great conquerors and heroes earned their so-called glories at the cost of hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. Glory is not worth that. Killing is not a noble thing, especially not for glory, said Garland. Then what is? Asked Loras. Fighting for your family and for your loved ones, that is worth fighting for. Fighting for the right thing so that 100 small folk don't have to take up arms to defend their homes, that is worth fighting for. There always is something beyond glory. I have Leonette and I have Alysanne. I am happy here, just as you are happy with Renly. Nymeria 3. Good luck, sister. You will be watched all of the time in the Red Keep, Oberyn said to Nymeria. Everyone is watched by someone's spy in King's Landing, Nymeria pointed out as she adjusted her hair and makeup using the mirror in their shared room in the tavern. Tyen, you look as innocent as a northern maid before her wedding, Oberyn commented. But of course, my child. And if you cast aside your sinful pride and vanity and marry a good man, the light of the Seven will be with you forever, said Tyen with such innocence as she gently patted Oberyn's shoulder. So young and innocent. Were she actually that innocent and was visiting Dorne for the first time, she wouldn't be a maiden for very long. Where is Sarala? Asked Tyen. Having a good time with a Stormlander captain, a Seaworth I think he was, Nymeria replied. And at that, there was a knock on the door, and without waiting for a reply, the door opened and Sarala entered. She looks as though she enjoyed herself. Had a good time, sister? Asked Oberyn. Very. He was very good with his cock and his tongue, she replied naughtily as she wiped sweat off of her dark skin. This is a cool day in comparison to Sunspear, though the city does stink of shit. Don't the Targaryens use the taxes to build sewers? Asked Oberyn. Probably are using it all on building armies to attack the Northerners. Or on the most beautiful of dresses for that Lannister bitch, Sarala commented. Quiet. All of you. Nymeria ordered. Her sisters shut up and turned to her. Though Oberyn was the eldest, Nymeria was considered the smartest and therefore made the plans. We meet here, once a night to discuss what we have discovered and what we must do next. Right now, we find out what we can about the Red Keep and how to break out the king in the north. And once we do, we contact Arthur Dayne, and once he breaks him out, Sarala will sail them to safety. Possibly in the Vale, Nymeria said. Why the Vale? Why not Sunspear? Asked Sarala. Too suspicious, especially for when you come back. At least in the Vale, you could claim that you were doing business with the Graftons of Gulltown. But Eddard Stark has many friends in the Vale. The closest one with a castle on the coast is House Royce of Runestone, said Nymeria. Now remember this, above all. Consider everyone here a potential spy. Whether they are men, women, children or elderly. Father has said that Varys the Spider is not above using children and street urchins as spies. So don't let your guard down around them, Nymeria advised. Once they all agreed, they went their separate ways. Tyen to the Great September of Baylor. Oberá to the Red Keep's stables. Sarala to Blackwater Harbour. And Nymeria to the throne room of the Red Keep. At the throne room, Nymeria looked around and spotted the members of the small council and the royals. Aegon and Rhaenys should be here. Aegon's rightful place is as the crown prince, not this pretty lemon cake of a boy, who looks as puny as Tristan. Cersei Lannister sat on the Iron Throne, with Jon Connington, the Hand of the King, standing by her side. Good lords and ladies, I have received news from Prince Viserys. He leads an army of 50,000 men of the Crown Lands, the Riverlands and the Vale, and march to liberate the Neck from the northern traitors. And soon, very soon, once they lay siege to Moat Cailin, all armies of the Crown will march north, and together, they shall liberate the North from the tyranny of the Starks, and our King's vision of reuniting Westeros shall be realized. Nymeria clapped enthusiastically like all fools and lickspittles in court. She may be as beautiful as Silver, Ynys and the Fowler twins put together, but by the Seven, she is stupid and does not make a good speech. Nymeria glanced at her eldest son, Jaehaerys. And he may look handsome, but he makes me nervous. Fucking hells, he reminds me of the Dark Star with that grin. Perhaps I can borrow one of Tyen's poisons and use it on him. Yes. That will do, and we can tie his claim to the Iron Throne, delay the royal marriage with Margaery Tyrell, and allow Aegon to take the Iron Throne. But then she glanced around again, and saw what could only be the man father warned her and her sisters to beware of. Where is the spider? Does he know already that we are in King's Landing to spy? As she glanced at him, his eyes darted around the court, and seemed to catch her looking at him. Remember what to do in this situation, Nym. Nymeria held the glance for a few seconds before looking back at the Lannister bitch sitting on Aegon's rightful throne. Chapter 40, The Dragon's Wings Unfold. Chapter text. Interlude 13, Aneurin Boerned star glowing star fan page on X, #Aneurin Boerned as Guy the Squire in #ironclad https://t.co/t.co/dbkqt012p/x. Domeric Bolton, Aneurin Boerned. Gods, these are great lands for going for a ride on, Domeric thought as he rode ahead alongside Deanna. Though father had always taught Domeric to be quiet, study people and their reactions, and most of all to save your emotion for those who deserve it, Domeric loved Deanna very much and made him feel the happiest he had ever been. Ho, there. What's that? Deanna asked, pointing to the horizon. Domeric looked ahead at what she was pointing at. A lone rider. A spy. What's the nearest castle? Domeric suggested. The twins, I think, said Deanna. One of the many Freys reporting for the Targaryens, you think? Deanna wondered. Well, let's go and ask him, my love, said Domeric with a grin. And at that, he clapped his stirrups against Reedam, his oldest friend since Uncle Mark had gifted him his best horse from the Rills on his 10th name-a-day. He had named Reedam after his favorite Bolton Red King, Royce IV, whom tore out the entrails of his enemies with his bare hands, as well as sacking Winterfell in a war with the Starks. Domeric loved Reedam and loved going for rides in the moors and plains of Dreadfort lands ever since he was a boy, but now it was something he enjoyed doing with Deanna. Domeric believed he inherited his horsemanship from mother, whom was a Ryswell, and he was reckoned by many to be the best rider in the north. And Domeric proved that when he charged straight towards the spy. As he got closer, the spy finally realized he was coming for him after staring in shock at Domeric's speed. He has to be a Frey. He's an ugly bastard and looks like a little weasel, Domeric thought as he got within a stone's throw distance of him. Domeric punched him hard as he collided with him, and he fell down from his horse, groaning and moaning. Domeric drew his sword and pointed it at the spy. Well, what are you doing here, you fuck ugly prick? Domeric demanded. These are my lord grandfather's lands, he said, sweating heavily and looking close to begging for mercy. He reminds me of the last time father and I executed someone the Bolton way of old. Reek. Well, at least this one doesn't quite stink like him. He's certainly uglier than him, though. The spy drew a sword and his sword shook as he pointed it at Domeric. Domeric raised both brows at him as he pointed it at him. Leave now, Northerner, and I'll let you live and forget I saw you, he tried to threaten, but Domeric was close to laughing. I'm close to pissing myself right now. From trying to not laugh at you, free cunt, he snarled. He squealed at Domeric's cold expression and tried to swing his sword, before he let out a loud yelp when his sword fell to the ground, coincided with an arrow piercing into the ground. That even took Domeric by surprise. "Sorry, Dom. Just couldn't let you have all the fun by yourself," said Deanna as she rode to join him, and put her bow back in her saddlebag. "Oh, that's all right, my love. I was just about to introduce myself to my new friend here. What's your name, Free?" "How do you know I am of House Free?" he bewilderedly asked. "Because these are free lands. You said that these are your lord grandfather's lands," Domeric replied as he rolled his eyes at his stupidity. "And then there's the fact that you're an ugly prick," Deanna pointed out. That's true," Domeric thought with a nod. He flushed in anger and picked up his sword and pointed it at Deanna. "I am Sir Roriger Free," he shouted, as though it meant something. Domeric and Deanna turned to face each other. They burst out laughing. "Gods, this is too funny for words. Well, I did say that I wanted to make Roriger suffer. I had meant Roriger Targaryen the dragon," said Deanna before she kicked his sword hand. He yelped as though he had been kicked in the cock and balls, and his sword landed in a nearby fast-flowing stream. "Well, maybe Roriger Free the Weasel can suffice for now. We can bring him home to the Dreadfort," Domeric offered. Deanna smiled amusedly and turned to the Free before turning back to Domeric. "Yes, I like that idea." "I like it a lot," said Deanna with a malicious smile. Roriger Free stared in horror at them when Domeric had mentioned home to the Dreadfort. "Fast work at realizing that we are Boltons. As if my pendant, my cloak fastener and the colors on my cape and the image on Deanna's cape did not give it away. Am I the only one who can deduce? Come, Roriger Free. Let's bring you to my good brother, Prince Prydain, and you can tell us what you were doing and for whom you were spying on us for," said Domeric as he pressed the tip of his sword against his ear. He climbed back on his horse as he shivered and started to cry. "Please. Mercy. Mercy, my lord. I can pay a ransom. My lord grandfather can pay a generous ransom," he begged. Deanna just started to laugh. "Mother always told me that southern knights were all so brave, so handsome and so strong," Deanna jested in a young girl's voice. They brought Roriger Free to the camp, just on the King's Road opposite the twins. At his good brother Prydain's planning tent, Domeric saw Father, Uncle Mark, Uncle William, Prydain and all other lords of the north and their sons. "My prince. Whilst scouting around, we found this free spy," Domeric announced as he and Deanna dragged him into the tent. Prydain looked up at Roriger Free and raised both brows. "Who is this?" "Why, this is brave Sir Roriger of House Free, brother," said Deanna. Father chuckled briefly whilst all the other lords and their sons burst out laughing. All whilst Roriger Free fell to his knees. "Get up, you shit piece," said Prydain, and one of his guards dragged him to his feet. "Hang on, what's that smell?" "Wait, has he just shut himself?" asked Smalljan. "Fuck. What is wrong with this worm?" "Oh, you really are a shit piece. Fucking disgusting," muttered Arya Stark. "This is why we don't feed those whom we interrogate or execute in the Dreadfort, otherwise they piss and shit everywhere. Okay, so Shitstorm, listen here. Where are the free armies? And, bear this in mind, I'm sure that my good brother Domeric has already told you of which house he is of," Prydain announced. "They join Prince Viserys' army, my prince. They left 3 days ago," he said quickly and eagerly. "Pity, I would have liked to have interrogated him the Bolton way," Domeric commented as he stood next to Brandon. "Are you sure, Dom? Do you really want him shitting himself before you've even started to flay him?" Brandon asked. "Good point, cousin," Domeric agreed with a nod. "Were you spying on us for Prince Viserys?" Father asked darkly. "No, my lord. I was to make sure that none of your scouts were watching for his army when they come. Gods, I'm glad that the Freys aren't our allies. The Targaryens can have them and their army as far as I'm concerned." "So? Where is Prince Viserys and his army?" asked Prydain. "Still in the Crown Lands, my prince. And he brings his dragon, Aerosaurus, with him," he said quickly. "Dragon?" Before there had been laughter every time that Roriger Free opened his mouth. But now there was a fearful and dreaded silence. "He's brought a fucking dragon. Then, the stories are true." They've got fucking 3 of these cunts. How big is this dragon? Asked Sir Willis Daily. Larger than the size of this pavilion, my lord, he replied. Domeric's eyes scanned around the pavilion and he sweated as he imagined an enormous fire-breathing dragon incinerating the entire army. All right, Sir Shitstorm, leave. Go back home, before you shit yourself again, Prydain ordered. He tripped over himself as he ran away and out of the camp. Was that wise, my prince? He could ride back to Viserys and tell him that we're coming for him, said Ricard Carstark. No, my lord, he's got balls and brains the size of lentil beans. He'll be running home as we speak, assuming he hasn't tripped over his own shit again, said Prydain. What about Viserys Dragon, my prince? Asked Uncle Willam. We have the ballista of weirwood and bottles of heart tree sap. Not even a great dragon can escape 30 ballista bolts, said Prydain. Domeric and Deanna left the command tent and walked to their own tent. A dragon. A fucking dragon. Gods, help us. Talisa 8. My princess, are you well? Asked Maester Jellimund. I do not know, replied Talisa, feeling unwell. Come, my princess. This way, said Maester Jellimund, helping her stand up and taking her with him to his chambers. He pulled out a chair for her and she sat down, and was passed some water by him. As she drank it, he examined her head and then her belly whilst looking tea passages in his book. My princess, you are with child, he said. I carry another child. But while Prydain is at war. No, he should be here with me and with Lyria. How long do you think, Maester? She asked. He examined her chest again and glanced again into his book. I should say 6 to 7 moons, my princess, he replied. I need to write to Prydain. Even if he cannot come, he needs to know. But I cannot do this alone. Maester, I will need to write 2 letters, said Talisa. 2, my princess, he asked. Yes, one to Prydain. And the other to Queen Ashura, and ask that she return to Winterfell, Talisa replied. Is that wise, my princess? During this war, Prydain is in the Riverlands with the northern army of 50,000 men. It couldn't be safer, she replied. Talisa left his chambers for her own and she found Lyria fast asleep in her bassinet. My beautiful little girl. You are the most precious little girl in the world. She leant in and gently kissed her head and whispered, your father and I love you so much, Lyria. And by the end of the year, you will have a younger brother or sister. Talisa kissed Lyria once more before leaving her to sleep in peace. She walked to Eddard Solar and started to write 2 letters. The first letter she wrote to was for Ashura. I know that she refuses to leave until she knows that Eddard is safe and returning to Winterfell, but she needs to return home. The longer she stays in Riverrun, the more at risk she puts not only herself in, but also House Tully and those Riverlords allied to House Tully and hate Rhaegar Targaryen. And then she wrote the letter for Prydain. Even if I do give birth to a son, Lyria will be queen in the north one day. I am glad that Eddard and Ashura allowed women to inherit. If Mormont women can rule as Lady of Bear Island, why can't the same be said of the rulers of Winterfell and the north? After finishing the letters and sealing them, she walked back to Maester Jellimund's chambers. When she opened his door, she could see that he had just received a letter. My princess. Shall I send those 2 letters now? He asked upon seeing her holding the letters. Yes please, Maester. Is that letter for me or for Prydain? She asked. It's for you, my princess. The sigil on the seal is that of a tiger, he replied. A tiger. Father. Talisa took the letter after giving him her 2 letters. She broke the seal and started to read the letter. Talisa, my beloved daughter. The news of the war between the North and Rhaegar has stirred up so many emotions in Volantis. All of Volantis, even the elephants, are eager for us to join the war on the side of my daughter and future queen in the north. By the time that you read this, Jorinos will be sailing with an army of 5,000 tiger cloaks towards White Harbor. Give our love to my beautiful granddaughter Lyria. Yours sincerely. Father. Talisa quickly looked up to see that Maester Jellimund was just attaching one of her letters to a raven's leg. Maester, have you sent the one for Prydain yet? She asked nervously. No, I haven't, my princess. It's this one, he said, holding up the letter he was just attaching to the raven's leg. Give it back to me, please. I have some important information to send to Prydain, she said. He took the letter off and passed it back to her. Using his quill and inkpot, Talisa added what father had written to her about, and that soon Joranos would be joining them with an army of 5,000 Tiger Cloaks, the Volan 10 warrior elite. The northern armies and the Tiger Cloaks combined, the Targaryens have no chance of victory, even in spite of their armies being potentially over 200,000 men. And then there's the 3 dragons. If the gods are kind, then the Maesters of White Harbor are correct that the ballista bolts of weirwood and coated with heart tree sap will kill them, and save the lives of thousands. Oh, my Prydain! May the gods watch over you and the northern armies. Come back to me and to Lyria and our future child. Jaime 11. Focus, Loron. Focus. Now, no matter how good you are, either today or 10 years from now, there will always be a warrior who is better than you at something, whether it's strength, speed, agility or simple skill. The trick is, let them come to you. And never ever interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. Yes, father. Interrupting them would be rude and unknightly, joked Loron. Yes, it would. It would be rude and unknightly, said Jaime with a smile. He's got a long way to go and many things to learn, but he is learning well. But still, I wish that he wasn't here. I'm just far too scared to lose him, Jaime thought as he remembered one of the last conversations he had had with Melita before they had left Casterly Rock. Jaime, called Lyle. Jaime turned around to see Lyle the Strongbow calling to him. Your father is calling us to his tent, he said. We are coming, Lyle. Jaime replied. What will grandfather have to say? Asked Loron as he sheathed his sword. Probably about what we will do when we regroup with the rest of the armies, Jaime replied with a shrug. Do you not want to fight, father? Asked Loron. That's a difficult question to answer. Yes and no, he replied. What does that mean, father? Asked Loron. It means that, yes, I want to fight in wars, for glory, for House Lannister and to put my skills to good use. But no, because the last time we fought the Northerners, they had massacred thousands of men, over 2,000 Westermen in one night, and we hadn't killed a single Northerner. As much as I want to avenge those men, Jaime said, whilst struggling to figure out how to finish that. You fear for the men in case we fight another battle such as that? Loron suggested. Jaime beamed at his son, whom he felt was a good Lannister, in that he was clever, wise, witty and good with a sword. That. And I fear for you, Jaime admitted unashamedly. And I fear for you, father. But, I promise that I will always be by your side and that I will always stand for House Lannister and that the Northerners will hear the roars of us both, he replied. Jaime hugged him tightly before they walked into father's tent. Jaime saw how father was looking out at the landscape. Something is wrong. I can sense it. But what? What's going on? Asked Jaime. Uncle Gerion spoke up. The Starks seem to be full of surprises, he said. What? What's this boy, Prydain, done? Has he fortified all of Moat Cailin with all armies of the north? He's marching down the King's Road and he is in the Riverlands. Our scouts spotted them building pontoon bridges to cross the Green Fork and the Blue Fork, explained Uncle Tijet. What in the seven hells? He's here, in the Riverlands. With the entire northern army. This cannot be commented Forley Prester. How many men? Asked Daemon Marbrand, Jaime's good father. 50,000 strong. Led by Prydain Stark, who is easy to spot, for he is the only one who wears a helm in the shape of a wolf's head, explained Uncle Gerion. But what is he doing in the Riverlands, rather than defend the north from Moat Cailin? Asked Andros Brax. Is he planning to attack Prince Viserys and then join with the rebellious Riverlords? Suggested Quentyn Bainfort. But as Jaime thought that the Lord of Bainfort had a sensible idea, he noticed how worried Uncle Tijet looked. Or what if his target is King's Landing? Uncle Tijet suggested. He cannot do that. There are many armies on the road to King's Landing, said Hayes Swyft, the stupidest of all Westerlords. Lord Lannick's suggestion does have merit, my lords. What if this is his plan? To target each and every army serving the Iron Throne before they can all unite under the banner of the king, suggested Roland Crickehall. If he is doing that, then that is very clever. And then he could be joined by his father's allies and old friends in the Riverlands, Stormlands and Vale. But all whilst Westerlords were giving their opinions on what Prydain Stark was doing and what they should do, Jaime saw how father looked around outside, as if trying to search for answers in the skies of the rivers rolling by. Quiet. Father finally ordered. All sat in silence waiting for father to speak. Though this young wolf has surprised us all by coming this far south of the north, it changes nothing. King Rhaegar has entrusted us to gather all of our armies to the Crown Lands. But, at the same time, Prince Viserys is marching towards Riverrun. It would seem that he thinks that if they crush the Tullys, it would send a lasting message to the Riverlords whom hold House Targaryen in contempt. But Prydain Stark is the main priority. He has a large army, and though we outnumber his army, they are a standing army and a well-trained and well-equipped one. Whilst the boy has no experience of war, his bannerman fought under his father in the last war. Now, I ride for King's Landing to speak with the King and Queen and to assume mantle of leadership of the combined armies, to deal with Prydain Stark and then march on the north. Sir Jaime shall be in command here, said father. If we were to fight and defeat Prydain Stark, my lord, what is to become of the traitorous wolf? Asked Leo Lefford. Kill him. Whomever does, shall be very richly rewarded, and I shall grant a personal favor to them, father promised. A Lannister always pays his debts. I bid you all farewell, my lords, said father before gesturing to Jaime to follow him outside. Jaime stood by father as they stood next to a tree stump, where Jaime saw a small bucket and a fishing rod. One of father's few hobbies outside of his work, Jaime remembered. Now that you are leading House Lannister's armies, I need you to remember that you are my heir. You will one day be Lord of Casterly Rock. So this is no time to be chasing after the Starks for glory as they retreat. You are a Lannister, and Lannisters do not act like fools, father reminded him. I am ready, Father, Jaime insisted. Father leveled a hard stare at Jaime's eyes. Remember what I have said. And come to Prince Viserys' aid if he needs it. I think that he may not know that Prydain Stark's army can build pontoon bridges and could intercept him before he gets to Riverrun, said father. Chapter 41, A Hero Comes. Chapter text. Prydain X. My prince, Viserys Targaryen and his army are marching just past Riverbend, said Benfred Tallheart, whom Prydain appointed commander of the scouts. Does he know that we are coming? Asked his father, Lord Hellman Tallheart. No, father. But I've seen his dragon, nervously said Benfred. What was it like, Ben? Asked Smalljon. Huge and terrifying, he simply replied. A target that enormous is surely going to be a much easier target for our ballista than if he was smaller. How many do they number? Asked Roose Bolton. 50,000 men, my lord, said Benfred. What do we do now, my prince? Asked Rickard Karstark. All turned to him as he looked at the map. We intercept them, here, as the river bends around the road, from where it gets its name. If what I've heard is true, it would make it a perfect spot for a trap. As they march on it, we shower them with arrows and crossbow bolts. And, they'll have no option but to retreat or to charge across the water and attack us. And whilst they attack our infantry, our cavalry and heavy infantry shall flank them from all sides at their rear. There are trees on that side of the river's bend, providing cover for our archers and for our ballista when the time comes to shoot down that big bastard. Prydain looked up at the northern lords and ladies, who looked at the map and thought over the plan. Lord Serwyn, Lord Mormont and Lord Tallheart will hold the infantry at the river's bend. Myself, Lord Bolton and Lord Glover shall command the cavalry, and Lord Umber, Lord Thorne and Lord Karstark shall lead the heavy infantry. Is that all clear? Mance Rayder was the first to speak. My prince, would it not be better to ambush them at night as they camp whilst besieging Riverrun? And give us a better chance to kill their dragon? It would be, Lord Rayder. However, the longer we let them march to Riverrun unchallenged, the greater the chance that they discover we are here. And there's no telling what Viserys will let his dragon do to Riverrun if we let them camp at Riverrun, Prydain explained. As they all left, Prydain could see it in their eyes. Fear. I fear them as well. Especially the fact that Viserys has brought his dragon along. But humans have killed dragons before. They did so in Dorne during the many times that the Dornish killed dragons and invaders led by the Targaryens. We are more than capable of doing the same. We are more than capable of accomplishing better than that. The next morning, Prydain led the cavalry alongside Roose Bolton, Mark Riswell, William Dustin and Galbart Glover. Prydain had given orders for no war horns to be used until the trap had been sprung on the Southerners, for he knew that if they used war horns to get into formation and begin the steady pace towards the battlefield, they would lose the element of surprise. Prydain donned his wolf helm, and as he rode closer alongside the lords, he took a deep breath and focused on hearing what he could from the enemy army in front. Ambush. We're under attack. Get into formation. Come on, lads. Shields up. Up. Where in the seven hells are these damned cowards? My prince. They're in the trees. There must be thousands of them. Prydain grinned that so far it was working. A distinctive war horn blew for all to hear. A northern war horn. Fuck. It's the Northerners. The Northerners. How did they get down here? Fuck. 7, save us. Warrior, grant us victory against these heathen savages. If they think they will have the better of us, they are as stupid as they say. Attack, lads. Save the kingdoms from these barbaric northern bastards. You must be Viserys Targaryen, Prydain thought. Prydain unsheathed ice and turned to see the lords accompanying him were doing the same. Quicken the pace. Now we ride, for victory and for the north. Prydain called up as he lifted ice up for all cavalry to see. Victory. The north, the cavalry shouted behind him. Prydain could taste the fear of the Southerners as he rode closer, as though it was meat cooking on a roast. And as he rode closer and closer, he could feel the urge to hunt, to fight, to kill. It felt like it was his one and only instinct. He soon felt a familiar feeling taking over, as he transformed into his first form. Domeric blew hard on his horn as they rode towards a small hill overlooking the battlefield. As Prydain stopped and looked down on the enemy, he grinned at the multitudes of enemies who had come all this way, to die. For the king in the north. For all Northerners. The North remembers, he shouted. The North remembers, was shouted back as Prydain charged down the hill. Prydain saw 3 knights, 2 wore the colours of House Smallwood and 1 wore the colours of House Byrch, and all 3 levelled their lances towards Prydain. Prydain's instincts allowed him to hold his shield up as the first Smallwood knight came charging at him. With his strength, he held the shield firm and it remained unbroken as the lance crashed straight into it. The lance shattered before Prydain punched the knight on the knight's helm. But even Prydain hadn't expected that the single punch had separated his helmeted head from his neck. Both horses of the other 2 knights reared up at the sight. Prydain used the pause and charged at the other 2. He threw his shield at the Smallwood knight, knocking him off of his horse, and he sliced ice across at the Byrch knight, cutting him in half. He turned to see a knight wearing the colours of House Linderley charging at him with a lance. Prydain turned his horse to face him and rode towards him. As he came closer, Prydain bent his back backwards, and watched as the lance missed him completely. And before the knight could react, Prydain chopped ice down onto him, slicing his head and right shoulder off completely. Prydain climbed down from his horse and he roared loud at all enemies around him. Come, southern fucks. Come and face the wolf, he shouted as a large man with an axe charged towards him, screaming. Prydain sidestepped, as though it was a dance, and sliced his sword across, splitting him in half. Prydain looked around and saw on a hill there was cavalry fighting off northern cavalry and infantry. The cavalry were seemingly protecting the banners of the Targaryen 3-headed dragon. Where is Prince Viserys? They better tell me. Prydain ran towards the hill, slicing and cutting at all infantry he came across, slaughtering dozens within just a few minutes as he ran up the hill. And as he came within a stone's throw of the hill, that was when he heard it. An earth-shattering roar. Aerosolars. Interlude 14, The Pillars of the Earth Cast and Character Guide. Darin Hornwood, Sam Clefin. Darin was in the front line of the infantry flanking the Southerners. Hornwood. Righteous in wrath. He shouted as he charged down at the Southern infantry with his sword and shield. Darin was left-handed, which made him seem strange to others as he grew up and amongst the northern nobility. But father had always been good to him and had told him, so long as you can fight well, my boy, and one day kill some Southerners, then you'll be fine, no matter which hand you use. and Darin found that using his left hand gave him advantages over other opponents than if he used his right hand. Darin ran towards two soldiers, one was a spearman of House Celtigar and the other was a swordsman of House Mutan. He charged at the spearman first, who tried to thrust his spear at Darin. Darin slammed his shield across first, deflecting the spear before cutting down on it, chopping it in half. Before the spearman could react, Darin sliced his sword across, slitting his throat. Then he came to the Mutan swordsman. He smashed both sword and shield onto Darin. Darin held back the blows before kicking his kneecap extending out. This pushed him back as he grunted in pain before Darin sliced his sword down onto his hand, cutting his fingers off. As he screamed, Darin thrust his sword through his neck. He pulled hard to get his sword out of his throat before he saw a knight wearing the colors of House Grafton coming toward him. The knight chopped across with a halberd. He had to stretch out far for his blow to strike at Darin. Never use a long weapon such as that in close quarters, Darin thought with a grin. Darin took a few steps back and the halberd smashed into his shield. He groaned angrily as he felt his shield start to crack. He saw the halberd was stuck on the ground. As the knight tried to pull it out of the sodden and muddy earth, Darin stomped on the shaft, snapping it, and ran up to him and sliced his sword across his neck, and then again, chopping his head off. But as he collapsed to the ground, he heard a sound that shivered him right to his feet and he quickly dropped his sword and shield. That can mean only one thing, he thought as he panted and pulled his hands away from his ears and looked up. Gods help us, for that thing will soon breathe hellfire on us, he thought as he picked up his sword and shield. Darin saw Prydain. He was charging towards the main hill where Viserys' main knights were. Darin was amazed at how quickly he was cutting down soldiers and knights in his charge, as though they were imaginary foes being cut down by a boy training with a sword for the first time. And the dragon set foot on the hill. Darin almost fell over, as he felt the ground shake from the dragon's landing. As he started to regain his footing, he looked up at the dragon and he saw a rider on its back, holding reins in one hand and a spear in the other. His armor was black and red, beautiful and unnecessarily ornate with a three-headed dragon formed of rubies on it. Prince Viserys Targaryen, the Wolf Prey's brother. Darin began to run to the hill. Where the fuck is that ballista? We need it now. We'll be fucking lunch for that fucking dragon if someone doesn't kill it soon. Darin smashed his shield across at a knight blocking his way. The blow damaged his shield at striking the neck of this knight, but also knocked him to the ground. Darin struck on his neck twice and finally cut his head off. He looked up at the hill and continued to charge up there. 5 soldiers stood in his way, all wearing the colors of House D'Ari. Darin stood ready to fight them and the first to charge was a spearman and the second was a man with a large mace. The man with the mace swiped across to smash Darin's face. No. You aren't smashing my beautiful face with that, southern twat. Darin dodged the blow before slicing down onto the mace. He blocked the blow with the shaft of the mace, until Darin slid his sword down onto his hand. He screamed at losing his fingers and thumb and dropped his mace before Darin stabbed him in the hip and then faced the spearman. He tried to thrust into his shield. Darin dropped his shield just before his spear could connect, missing him completely, and Darin stomped on the man's heel and grabbed him by his mail coif. He leveled his sword against his neck and slit his throat, feeling blood spitting out onto his hands even as he let go. He looked up to the 3 remaining men and they all charged at him simultaneously. Fuck. Darin drew his dagger and threw it at one of them. The blade found its way into his skull. He stared up at the dagger as he dropped his axe and shield, but was still standing. Finally, he fell to his knees and then his face before Darin faced the last 2. Darin dodged one who sliced with a great sword and Darin sliced his blade at his legs, hitting his kneecaps, before he faced the other. The second man blocked Darin's strike with his sword and then his next before he slammed his shield against Darin's helm. Gods, I will fucking destroy you for that, he thought as he felt blood pour from his nose. Feel the wrath of the bull moose, ass-faced southern shitpiece. Darin pulled off his helm and used it as a shield and as he slammed his sword to try and cut Darin's head, he blocked it with his helm before he sliced his throat. As he fell to his knees, clutching his bleeding throat, Darin turned to the wounded first man and he tried to grab a spear to throw at Darin. Darin stabbed him through the skull before he could. And as he wrenched his bloody sword out, he looked up to see a man in the shining gold-colored armor of a knight of the Kingsguard, standing just on the edge of the hill. As Darin faced the Kingsguard knight, he glanced at his own sword, and saw the numerous cracks all up and down the blade. Fuck. Just as I am about to fight a fucking Kingsguard. The Kingsguard pointed his blooded sword at Darin. Your name, young lord, he asked with a mocking voice. Darin, heir to House Hornwood. And you, sir, he asked with pride of his family's name and history. Sir Jonat Hordiari of the Kingsguard, he replied sternly before he held his shield up and readied himself for whatever Darin would attack with. Darin swung his sword around a few times before he swung both sword and helm at the Kingsguard's shield. Jonat Hordiari, a knight who had been Kingsguard for longer than Darin had been alive, held his ground better than any he had crossed swords with. Dari slammed his shield against Darin's unprotected face. You fucking southern cunt. Darin could feel a couple of his teeth were loose and he could taste blood in his mouth. Darin spat blood out at the Kingsguard's own face. Shit. Jonat Hordiari grunted. Wasting no time, Darin smashed his helm and sword down onto his shield until he let go. Darin sliced his sword across at him, but the Kingsguard blocked the blow with his sword and then slammed his sword down onto Darin's blade. Darin felt his heart sink to see his sword's blade shatter to pieces. Ha, taunted the Kingsguard. Darin dodged his next blow, but the next took him by surprise, slicing his thigh. Darin yelled out in pain before he felt a boot kick him in the cheek. Fucking southern twat. He looked up and somersaulted away as he tried to stab down on him. Darin charged at the Kingsguard and swung his helm to block his sword's blow. Still he held the handle of his broken sword as his helm fell from his hand, having deflected Dari's sword. With all his might, Darin smote his sword's handle on the Kingsguard's helm and again until he swung his sword across, slicing Darin's shoulder. Darin yelled out as he looked down at his bleeding shoulder. He had lost the grip of his sword's handle after Dari's sword cut his shoulder. The Kingsguard threw down his battered helm, and Darin grinned savagely as he saw the blood that poured from where his broken sword had struck him. The Kingsguard panted and reached for the gash on his forehead, where he was bleeding. Northern bastard, he muttered. Riverman shitpiece, replied Darin. Darin looked down on the ground and picked up the spear that one of the dead had tried to throw at him. He pointed it at Dari, just as he had been ready to charge at him and cut him down. But seeing Darin point a spear at him, the Kingsguard stayed his sword briefly, whilst thinking of what to do next. Targaryen. Today is your last, a mighty dragon. Darin turned to his left and couldn't believe what he had seen. For just a moment, Prydain had just reached top of the hill as Darin had. And then he had leaped up, without warning, and sliced down on the dragon's neck. Dracarys. Viserys had commanded his dragon. But the command came too late, and the dragon let out a piercing scream as I sliced into his neck. The dragon looked down at Prydain and tried to reach out and catch him with its mouth. Prydain jumped out of the way and chopped down onto its neck again and again and again. By the gods! Darin felt his mouth watering as he stared at Prydain chopping the monster's head off after the fourth blow. What the fuck? Jonat Hordiari muttered, watching as Darin and most of the armies were. Like a lion mad with wounds, Darin roared as he charged with his spear at the Kingsguard, his heart filled with hope once again after seeing the fall of the dragon. His thrust was narrowly dodged by Jonat Hordiari, who sliced his sword down onto his spear, breaking it in half. Darin picked up the spearhead and as the Kingsguard sliced across to deliver a fatal blow, Darin held up his arm, protected by his wrist guard. The blow had hurt in spite of not cutting through. But it gave Darin the time he needed to elbow his unprotected face and then stab him in throat. Through flesh, muscle and bone, so strong a blow Darin had thrusted until he saw a handbreadth of the spear sticking out from the back of his neck. Darin panted as he let go and the Kingsguard fell onto his back, gasping and coughing blood with his last breaths before he breathed his last. I've killed a storied knight of the Kingsguard. Gods, I cannot wait to tell Aelys all about this and our little Horlys when he is old enough. Darin looked up to see Prydain slice ice down onto Viserys Targaryen, eviscerating the Valyrian prince. He did it. He's killed a dragon and the wolf prey's own brother. Darin cheered long and loud as he watched the remainder of Viserys' army retreat from the battlefield. He felt his heart soar with pride at watching Prydain lift ice up high and cheer with them. A victory all of the North will sing of, lads. Prydain roared as he took off his blooded direwolf helm. Darin lifted his sore and blooded arm up high and cheered again, ignoring the pain he felt from his shoulder. Prydain Dragonspan. Darin shouted as he was joined by father's men, the men of House Hornwood. And together with his men, they chanted Prydain Dragonspan. Darin looked around and grinned when he heard the chant could be heard all over the battlefield, the chant of Prydain Dragonspan. Chapter 42, Prison Break. Chapter Text. John 18. My queen, Lord Raymond of House Dare is here, said Sir Meryn Trant, Lyn Corbray's replacement, chosen by Cersei for no other reason other than that he was loyal to Cersei and only to her. Good. Let us see what news he brings from the damned northern traitors, said Cersei as she rose from the king's seat at the small council. Don't get too comfortable in that chair, or the Iron Throne, Lannister bitch. I'll soon ensure that you are unseated from both and Jaehaerys is unseated from his place as crown prince. They entered the throne room, and as Cersei sat on the Iron Throne, Jon stood at her side whilst her children stood at her other side. Lord Raymond Dare, the most powerful of the Riverlords loyal to House Targaryen, knelt before Cersei. My queen, he greeted her. Rise, Lord Dare. Welcome to our capital. Now, what news do you bring? And where is Prince Viserys? Asked Cersei. He grimaced as he rose. He is dead, your grace. What? How? Did the Lannisters discover our intentions? Dead, Lord Dare. How is that possible? Asked Jon. We were marching to besiege Riverrun, Lord Hand, to send a lasting message to the Riverlords whom Prince Viserys felt would betray House Targaryen yet again given the chance. A sensible step. House Tully owes everything to House Targaryen, and yet they betrayed House Targaryen, along with many other Riverlords. But on the march, just as we were passing Riverbend, we were ambushed by archers from across the river. Prince Viserys ordered that I lead an infantry attack on them across the river. Though it was shallow, it was a fast-flowing river, and many struggled as archers and crossbowmen shot many men down before we could fight the enemy. As I came closer, I saw that they were Northerners. What? The Northerners are in the Riverlands. By the Seven, how did they get as far as Riverbend without us knowing? Without even Varys knowing. Jon turned to the eunuch spymaster, whom looked just as surprised as Jon, which he found frightening. All nobles in court gasped or stared in astonishment at the news. But as we fought the northern infantry, we heard a chilling and familiar sound of northern war horns behind us. I turned around to see the northern cavalry and heavy infantry flanking our cavalry and our infantry from the flanks. Prince Viserys rode Aerosolas high into the sky. And as I tried to organize a defense by withdrawing back onto solid ground, I saw him. Prydain Stark. The best fighter I have ever seen. He cut down knights and soldiers by the dozens and was dauntless and unstoppable as he charged across the battlefield towards where Viserys' knights were, led by my cousin, Sir Jonnet Hoare. Just as Prince Viserys had landed Aerosolas, Prydain Stark had charged with an incredible speed before he leaped up and sliced his sword into the dragon's neck. After landing, he faced the dragon again and sliced his neck thrice more before its head was sliced off. Prince Viserys charged at him with a spear, but he too was cut down by the Stark traitor. Not only is Viserys dead, but Aerosolas too. And the dragon was literally beheaded by Prydain Stark. And what of the army, Lord Dare? Asked Miles. Defeated, Sir Miles. I led what men I could out of there after seeing we had no chance of victory, especially after the death of our prince and the slaying of Aerosolas. We had been marching for Maidenpool before a northern messenger gave us leave to collect our dead and wounded. There, we collected the prince's body and brought him back to King's Landing. What of your losses, Lord Dare? Asked Jon. 29,000 are dead, Lord Hand, and another 12,000 are wounded. And Sir Jonnet Hoare? Asked Richard. He's dead, my lord. Killed by Darin Hornwood, replied Lord Dare. Jon glanced around at the throne room. All courtiers and nobles held a shocked silence at such a brazen defeat handed to the crown by the northern traitors, and that Prydain Stark, a boy of 20 whom had never fought in war or battle before, had killed a great dragon and a Targaryen prince. And the fact that this had all taken place in the Riverlands had shocked Jon the most. What of the northern army, Lord Deari. Where is it now? Asked Jon. They were marching down the God's Eye, the last my scouts reported of them, my Lord Hand, replied Lord Deari. You did well in bringing back Prince Viserys, Lord Deari, was all Jon could say to Lord Deari before he bowed once again and took his leave. Cersei led them back to the small council, accompanied by her eldest son. It appears we underestimated the Stark boy. Gravely Richard simply said. How is it possible that a dragon the size of Aerosaurus could be beheaded by just one man? Asked Miles. You forget that he wields the Stark Valyrian steel sword, Ice Jon pointed out. But before Jon could arrive, he saw the Red Keep had yet another arrival, Tywin Lannister. Lord Tywin, you have heard the news of the Battle of Riverbend? Asked Jon. I have, Lord Hand. My son, Sir Jaime, leads the Westerlands army and await our orders on what to do next, Tywin Lannister replied. Jon nodded in approval before gesturing for him to join them in the small council. Both Cersei and Pycelle looked delighted by the arrival of Tywin Lannister in the small council. Why do you look so entranced by his arrival? His presence here will not make any difference. And it will take more than the old Lion of Casterly Rock to bring a swift end to a boy such as Prydain Stark. No sooner had they taken their seats that Cersei's stupid son opened his stupid mouth. We should cut off Eddard Stark's head and send it to his son. If we do that, we will infuriate the Northerners. And then his children will enact a bloody vengeance on the crown, my Prince Richard pointed out. And with them so close to the Crown lands and one of our largest armies destroyed, there's no telling what they will do next, Miles added. But we cannot do nothing. Cersei angrily stated. We will not. I will send word to Jaime to lead the army of the Westerlands to pursue the Northerners whilst we send the Sellsword armies, Dothraki Horde and Unsullied to intercept the Northerners. They'll be trapped between them, Tywin immediately suggested. Cersei readily agreed to her father's plan, and it was swiftly backed up by Pycelle and Sir Kevan. What of Eddard Stark? I want Prydain Stark to suffer. Jaehaerys all but moaned like a spoiled brat. You can entertain him in the Black Cells later, Sweeterling said Cersei soothingly to her idiot son. What is this? Tywin demanded. I have been punishing Eddard Stark for his treasons in the Black Cells by having him beaten, Jaehaerys said proudly, as though he was expecting some sort of reward or words of praise from his grandfather. Instead he looked very disappointed. Such behavior is unbecoming of a prince of Targaryen and Lannister blood. And why is it that he is still in the Black Cells? Tywin demanded, turning to his daughter. Believe me, Lannister, if I had the authority, I would have moved him out of there long ago and made sure that Jaehaerys would go nowhere near him. He is one of the greatest of traitors the realm has ever seen. He should be treated as such, she insisted. He is also the Lord of Winterfell. Treating him as a common criminal is not only insulting, but also stupid. Especially when his son leads the battle-hardened Northern army on the Crown lands, already fresh from victory of personally killing your good brother and slaying his dragon, he said simply, emphasizing the word stupid to Cersei, which made Jon grin slightly. It would be better served to have him brought to chambers more suited to a man of his position and have him cared for before he can stand before a trial for his treasons, said Tywin. Trial? We should burn him right now with wildfire like his father had been executed, said Jaehaerys with a frightening glee. Tywin's eyes opened wide at his gruesome recommendation. Jon couldn't tell if it was disgust, disappointment or shock. You are becoming just like your grandfather by the day, your Targaryen one, not your Lannister one as your mother may have hoped. Perhaps, it would be best if the prince were to rest, seeing as he has only found out that he has just lost his beloved uncle. Jon recommended to Cersei. Tywin nodded to Jon and then glared at Cersei. She gently took her son's hand and left with him, whilst he was grumbling and complaining. Jon walked to Rhaegar's chambers and found him rereading a book he had spent over a year trying to get his hands on, a northern book written about werewolves. Rhaegar, said Jon. He looked up from his book and smiled as he looked at Jon. I'd be beaming with happiness with the way he smiles at me, if the circumstances were normal. Jon, what news is there? He asked. None good, your grace. Viserys is dead. His army defeated. And Aerosaurus beheaded, he replied quickly. Rhaegar put his book to one side as he stared at Jon in a shocked silence. My brother and his dragon are dead, he asked. Yes. Both by the same man. Prydain Stark John confirmed. Eddard 18. Eddard opened his eyes and blinked many times to get used to the one and only light in the cells. He woke to the sounds of men marching in the cells. Jaehaerys and his glorious bodyguard come to beat me again. Or is it Rhaegar come to question me about his fabled werewolves? Whom the fuck does he think I am, a fucking werewolf? King of the wolves indeed. Eddard looked down at his leg and feared that his leg would become infected and would have to be cut off. Eddard Stark, he heard a voice say loudly. Neither Jaehaerys nor Meryn Trant would say my name like that. Nor is this man's voice familiar. Eddard weakly stood up, his leg aching as he leant on the chains his manacles were connected to. 4 household soldiers of House Targaryen came into view, and they carried a stretcher. The Gaular accompanied them alongside Sir Barristan. Open it, he ordered. The Gaular did as he was ordered, and both he and Sir Barristan were the only ones to enter his cell. Release him, ordered Sir Barristan. Again, the Gaular followed his orders, and Eddard rubbed his wrists as he felt a blissful relief at being freed of the manacles. Sir Barristan. What news is there of my wife and my children? Eddard asked desperately. I haven't heard about them other than the lies that Jaehaerys says. Your queen is still undiscovered. But your son Prydain has led an army into the Riverlands and has defeated Prince Viserys' army. At Riverbend, he killed both Viserys and his dragon, Aerys Aulers, he explained. Prydain has killed Viserys Targaryen. Destroyed his army. And he has killed a great fire-breathing dragon. Come, my lord. At last, you are to be taken to better chambers than this, and your wounds and injuries shall be attended to, he said. At that, the 4 soldiers that had come had placed Eddard on their stretcher and took him with them out of the black cells. As they left, Eddard coughed at smelling fresh air for the first time in a long time and feeling the sun on his face. Are they going to try and negotiate with Prydain now? No. They still have many armies and 2 dragons. And they are too stupid and too stubborn to admit that they are fighting a losing war. But, by the gods, Prydain has done us all proud by crushing 1 army and being the first lone man to slay a dragon in a long time. Eddard was taken to a chamber in the small hall. He had 2 guards stationed inside his chambers and another 2 stationed outside. Soon Grand Maester Pycelle shall come to attend you, my lord, said Sir Barristan as Eddard lay down on his bed. To what end, Sir Barristan? Eddard asked. Until the war's end, and then you shall be placed on trial for treason, he explained. I pray that the war does not end soon, and that Prydain will destroy all of your armies and avenge me. I care not for me, but only for Ashera, our children and grandchildren, and for the north. A pity I am not well enough to find Rhaegar and finish what I started and strangle he and Cersei for all they did to my family. Pycelle came to treat him whilst Sir Barristan had left. Though Pycelle treated him reluctantly, he could see. Are you here to poison me? Eddard often found himself wondering as Pycelle stitched the various wounds on his body, arms and legs. In the days that passed, the only people whom Eddard would ever see were the guards, whom would change after every mealtime he had, the servants who brought his food, and Pycelle when he came to examine him. Does your king and queen not wish for me to die? Eddard asked scornfully. They are your king and queen as much as they are mine, traitor, he replied with as much scorn. But, Lord Tywin Lannister has ordered that you be treated well for your eventual trial, he continued. On the 8th day, Eddard's wounds were healing, and were not at all infected. And his leg bones were healing, though he was forced to use a crutch to walk. As a servant brought his platter of morning food, Eddard quickly noticed a small note concealed between 2 slices of toasted bread. He quickly grabbed it and tucked it in his sleeve before he began to eat and drink. I cannot risk them seeing me read this. He waited until he needed to shit before he would attempt to read it. He walked to the corner of the chambers and to his chamber pot. He pulled his breeches down, and as he had his back turned to the guards, he drew the note from his sleeve, with the noise of shit squirting down into the chamber pot concealing the noise of parchment crackling. Help is at hand. Come your afternoon meal, be ready for an escape. We will smuggle you out of King's Landing and then on a ship to Runestone. Eat this note once you have read it. Arthur. Rather than eat it, Eddard crumpled it into a tiny ball and dropped it into the chamber pot and pissed down onto it, mixing it in with the shit. He limped back to his bed with his crutch before laying down and staring at the roof. Arthur is here. He cannot be alone. He must have others helping him if he was to come here to rescue me. Thank the gods. I will soon see Ash and our children. Eddard listened out for voices from behind the door. He smiled slightly when he heard a familiar voice speak. "We're your relief," said Arthur. "Good, I'm hungry," said one of the guards on the other side. And then came the clashing of steel against flesh. The guards in his chamber reached for their swords as they turned to face the door. Before either could open it, the door was kicked open and a large man wearing a Targaryen soldier's armor kicked one down and stabbed the other with a large spear. The man kicked down was stabbed by Arthur, whom Eddard recognized even with his head and face shaved of hair. "Ned. Are you well enough to travel?" asked Arthur. I will be," he said with a nod. "Can you wear their armor and march in spite of your leg?" asked the other, whom sounded like a Dornish woman as opposed to Eddard thinking it was a man. I will," Eddard replied. "Hurry then, we haven't long before they realize that these four haven't come to barracks," said the woman. As Eddard pulled a corpse of one his height toward him, he glanced at the woman. "Whom are you, my lady?" he asked. "I am no lady. I am Oberyn Sand of House Martell," she replied proudly. "Must be one of Oberyn's daughters." Once Eddard dressed in Targaryen armor, the three marched out of the small hall. Though Eddard grinded his teeth together as he tried to march properly, with his legs bones screaming for every long-reaching step he made. "How much further?" Eddard whispered to Arthur. "Not farther. We have a wheelhouse here," said Arthur, pointing at a wheelhouse, elaborately decorated with imagery of the 7-point star and of the 7 gods. "Whose wheelhouse is this?" he wondered as 2 young and beautiful women came into sight. "That of the High Septons, your grace," said one of them, whom Eddard immediately recognized as Nymeria Sand. "You must go in the baggage hold, your grace." "I've made it as comfortable as possible," said the other, dressed as a Septa and with a quiet and innocent voice, though she looked similar to Nymeria and Oberyn Sand. Possibly one of their sisters. "My thanks, my lady," he said with a grateful nod before the one dressed as a Septa opened the baggage hold and Eddard took off his helmet and crawled inside. He was at least glad that he could limp and drag his leg rather than attempting to walk normally or march. "What now?" Eddard asked Arthur. "Now, the High Septon will be traveling to Blackwater Harbor to preach to sailors and commoners at the local brothels there. Whilst he is doing that, you and I will board the Summer Arrow, and it will sail us to Runestone," Arthur explained. "Our sister Sorrela is its captain," explained Oberyn before she closed the baggage hold's door. Interlude 15, Olympians shown in Troy, Fall of a City, 2018, Lex King as Aphrodite, Shamilla Miller as Athena, Inge Beckman as Hera, at Behind Fairy Tales on Tumblr. Sorrela Sand, Shamilla Miller. Sorrela stood on the forecastle of the Summer Arrow and spotted the wheelhouse of the High Septon. For all his preaching to sailors and whores, I wonder how many High Septons before him have visited brothels and tasted a whore dressed as the maiden. It's certainly the sort of thing which Tyen would do, when she was in an innocent mood. The High Septon was helped out from the wheelhouse and was accompanied by various Septons and Septars, one of whom Sorrela recognized as her religious sister Tyen. Sorrela recognized Arthur Dayne as he opened the baggage hold and out came a man dressed in the livery of household guards of House Targaryen. "So that's the great king in the north that frightens children to sleep. I wonder what stories they'll tell of his son, Prydain Dragonspan." "Sister, you have blood on your Targaryen livery," Sorrela pointed out to Oberyn. "A pity there is only a small amount," Oberyn replied as she helped the king in the north on board. Arthur Dayne walked behind them and as Oberyn helped the northern king sit down on a bench on deck, Sorrela was glad to see Nymeria and Tyen had rejoined the High Septon. But then she saw a problem. Gold cloaks. What the fuck are they doing here? She saw a group of 10 gold cloaks led by an officer on horseback, whose face looked like a frog, to Sorrela. "Ah, that must be Janos Slynt. Gods, Oberyn wasn't exaggerating." "Oberyn. Arthur. Your Grace. Ditch the Targaryen livery now. Gold cloaks are here, led by their commander Slynt. Sorrela hissed at her sister and their charge. "Distract him. Give us 5 minutes." Oberyn answered as Sorrela noticed them running for her cabin. "Don't mess my wardrobe in there. I just got my hands on some beautiful Yiddish silk." Sorrela walked across the gangplank and onto the quay, just as Janos Slynt saw her and made a beeline toward her. Is there something I can help you with? She asked. Why is a foreign woman captain of a ship? He demanded. Foreign? I'm Dornish, she snapped. He looked furious at the remand. I am Janos Slynt, commander of the City Watch. And if you are the ship's captain, then you will know to pay the taxes, he said, with a greedy glint in his eye. Oh. You must be one of Cersei Lannister's little pets. Aunt Elia would never have allowed scum like you to command the Gold Cloaks. What taxes are these? Sarilla asked with raised brows. For use of the key and for using the markets here to transport your trading goods abroad, he replied. Well, that's interesting. I'm quite sure I've never heard of that law, Sarilla said as she put her hands on her hips. It's a new one, true. The coin of course goes to funding the royal armies for crushing the northern rebels, he said with a stupid smirk. Right, I see. And I am sure that none of that coin would end up in your pockets and pay for a bigger mansion in the city or even some fancy doublet or some barrels of Dornish red. Of course not. Sarilla, how could you even suspect such a thing of such a noble officer of the law? How much? Sarilla lazily asked. Depends. What are you transporting? Yetish silks, Summer Isles golden heartwood, Arbor gold, Mirish oranges and Tiroshi alum, all heading to Runestone. In that case, 5 silver stags, 1 for each of the goods, he said greedily. You aren't even getting a measly copper from me, you greedy frog-faced fuck. But of course, Commander Slynt. Here is my payment, said Sarilla with an evil grin before reaching out and grabbing his cock and balls, scrunching them with her strong hand and nails. He screamed and whimpered as she held on tight and with her other hand, pointed her cutlass at his throat. Fuck off, now. Or I'll cut these off and let you bleed to death right here, like any normal criminal you and yours kill, she whispered as his men looked on in shock. He nodded like one of Laws's dolls with a bobbing head and whimpered louder than any man, woman or child Sarilla had ever come across. Sarilla let go and he walked back to his men, his face redder than the Lannister banners hanging around the Red Keep and the city. Sarilla's crew all laughed at him as he ran away in shame, and even his own men were laughing at him. As she stepped back onto her ship, she saw Oberyn dressed in a sailor's clothing whilst Arthur and King Eddard were dressed ordinarily. I'll see you and the others when I get back from Runestone, Sister Sarilla said before pulling her eldest sister in for a quick hug. Oberyn patted her shoulder before stepping off the ship. Let the sails down. Let's catch some wind. Sarilla called out to her crew once they had turned the ship about and were sailing out of the harbour. Sarilla entered her cabin with Arthur and the king in the north. As she started to plot a course to Runestone, the Northern King spoke. How far is it to Runestone, Captain Sarilla? He asked. 10 days. Maybe even 2 weeks, depending on the tide and the winds, Your Grace, Sarilla answered, looking up at the Northern King as he rested his wounded leg on a bench. Before she could look back down on her map, she could hear bells ringing from the city behind them. Sarilla looked from her cabin's windows and looked at the city to see bells ring. I wonder what that's all about, she thought with a grin. Nymeria 4. Soon after returning to the Red Keep, Nymeria grinned when she looked around at the Targaryen and Lannister soldiers running around, searching for the king in the north. Stupid fucks. Did you really think it would be this easy and that he would be hiding in that well? Nymeria wondered as 2 Lannister soldiers threw a lit torch down the nearby well. Nymeria entered the throne room as court was being held. Jon Connington was the first to speak whilst Cersei Lannister sat on the throne that was rightfully Aegon's. Try not to cut yourself on the blades, you golden bitch. Cersei Lannister was the first to speak, raising her elegant voice for all in the throne room to hear. It is with great regret that we announce the escape of the fugitive traitor, Eddard Stark. In spite of citywide searches, it would appear that the traitor has now escaped. Nymeria found herself talking to Lady Tanda Stokeworth about it before silence was called again. Nymeria often chose to speak with her because she considered her and her 2 daughters stupid enough to be reliable sources of court gossip. His Grace, King Rhaegar, has announced a large bounty has been placed on the traitor's capture or killing. For his capture, the reward is 500,000 gold dragons, and for his killing, 250,000 gold dragons, Cersei Lannister continued. Fuck, that's a fuckload of gold. Has any one man been worth that much in Westeros history? And now, we have better news to share, regarding the war with the traitor's eldest son, Prydain Dragonspan of House Stark, announced John Connington. Oh, gods! What will they do now? Whatever they do, I must send word to Talisa or to Prydain. But how, with the city on a lockdown, still in a desperate search for the king in the north and those who helped him? Sir Jaime Lannister commands the Westerland's army of 75,000 strong, and they march from the Trident onto the northern rebel army whilst they must contend with the sellsword armies led by the Golden Company, the Dothraki horde of Khal Rakaro and the Unsullied Legion. Together, they shall bring an absolute end to this rebellion and ensure the reunification of the realm, said Cersei Lannister. All nobles and courtiers clapped at her announcement, which Nymeria had no choice but to join in. Hearing this speech from the usurping Lannister whore whom had usurped Aunt Elia's place as queen and wanted to steal Aegon's birthright for her own son, Nymeria tried hard not to glower at her for what this meant for her cousin's husband and their daughter. I will need to send word to Talisa. She can then send word to Prydain. Chapter 43, The Lord of Runestone. Chapter text. Arthur 9. Ned. Gods, it's good to see you, said Lord Yohn Royce. Gods, he is a big and hard man, Arthur thought as he looked at him from his hard and gnarled hands, his face battered by cold winds and scars from battles. His ancestral bronze armor was particularly impressive, and at his side was the Royce family sword Lamentation, a Valyrian steel sword once lost for a long time until its recovery in King's Landing, and Rhaegar gifted it back to him to try and gain favor from the Royces and from the Vale Lords. Ned and his old friend hugged before he introduced him to his sons Sir Andor and Sir Robar and his daughter Lady Zilla. What of your third son, Sir Waymar? Asked Ned. He is in the Night's Watch. First Ranger in Castle Hardrock, the Lord of Runestone replied proudly. And then he turned to Arthur. Arthur Dayne. The last I saw of you was in that disgusting and ugly city that is the capital, he said. Indeed, my lord. And I apologize for coming here and putting you and your house in danger, said Arthur as he bowed his head. Nonsense. Rhaegar and his Lannister pets have no friends here or amongst the true Vale Lords. Except for those pathetic Corbrays and money-grubbing Graftons, he replied before inviting them both into the Bronzer Keep. Both Eddard and Arthur said a quick farewell to Sarilla before she began to sail back to King's Landing. In his solar in the Bronzer Keep, Lord Royce allowed them to write letters to Winterfell. Before they began to write, he told them his plan. Once you are both rested and Maester Hellyweg has had a good look at your leg, Ned, one of my ships can sail you both to White Harbor. Thank you, Yohn. There aren't any words that can express how grateful I am for all your help, said Ned. Think nothing of it, Ned, he simply said with a smile. Arthur took a quill and started to write 2 letters. The first was to Ashura and the second was to Elia. Ash, dearest sister. Both Ned and I are safe in Runestone as I write this, and are Lord Royce's guests. By the time that you read this, we shall be sailing to White Harbor. Ned's leg is wounded after being backstabbed by Jaime Lannister, and he suffered many injuries from mistreatment at the hands of Cersei Lannister and her cruel and poisonous son Jaehaerys. Once he has recovered well enough, we shall begin our journey. I pray that this letter finds you well, and I cannot wait to see you. Arthur. Next, he started to write a letter to Elia. Before he started to write it, he drew her favor from his pocket, and as he looked at the imagery sewn on it, he beamed as he remembered the last he saw of her in Sunspear. Gods, I miss her. Elia, my love. You will have heard by now from your nieces that we had rescued Ned. Currently, we are in Runestone to give Ned time to heal and recover from wounds and injuries suffered from his time in the Black Cells. Once he has recovered, we will sail for White Harbor. Upon returning him to Winterfell and to Ash, I shall return to Dorne and to you. I miss you so much, my love, and I long for the day that I see you again and hold you in my arms. I love you so much. Arthur. Ashura 18. It had been a whole moon that Ashura had been in Winterfell, ever since she had heard the news from Jason Mallister that Prydain was marching the northern armies into the Riverlands. I should be there, with him and at his side, she thought during the voyage from Seaguard to Flint's Finger. But whilst she was glad to be back home in Winterfell and with Talisa and Lyria, she feared for Prydain, Halric, Artos, Deanna, Ulric, Rickon and Arya. Elyanna and Serena were both safe in the north in Carhold and Barrowton respectively. She especially feared for Ned, and part of her daily routine was asking Maester Jellimond if there were any ravens from Arthur or Prydain. Ashura often found herself laying in bed, with her arms outstretched, desperately hoping to feel Ned by her side. But every morning and evening, she fought to keep tears away as she knew well that Ned was still in the hellhole that was King's Landing. One such morning, Ashura woke up and sighed sadly as she opened her eyes to see that Ned was indeed not there. She stood up and after dressing, she walked to the hall to see Talisa talking with Maester Jellimund. "Is all well?" she asked. "Yes, your grace," said Maester Jellimund before leaving to go to his solar. "I've just received word from Lord Marndaeli, Ashura. My brother Joranos has sailed through the Bay of Crabs and has made landfall on the road between Solpants and Maidenpool and with an army of 5,000 tiger cloaks," said Talisa. "Good. Very good. Prydain needs all of the help he can get. Even if he could take on Viserys' army and kill him and his dragon, he will need as many men as he can get." Thinking about Prydain reminded Ashura when they had first received the news of the Battle of Riverbend. Neither Talisa nor Ashura could believe that Prydain had not only utterly crushed Viserys' army and killed him, but he had beheaded an actual dragon, large enough to be ridden on, to breathe fire on entire armies and wipe out an entire village within less than half a minute. "How soon will they be able to link up with Prydain?" asked Ashura. "A week, perhaps 2 at most, Ashura. But I've also had troubling news from my cousin, Nymeria, who is spying in King's Landing, for Sunspear, and for me," Talisa added. "Gods, no. What news?" "The Lannister army is marching towards them, just as they were marching next to the God's Eye. Whilst Jaime Lannister is behind them, they have an army of sellswords and a horde of Dothraki in front of them," she explained. "Sellswords? Dothraki? And now the entire Westerlands army. Gods, help my Prydain through this. My queen." Ashura turned around to see Maester Jellimund running towards her with 2 letters. "These have just arrived, my queen, from Runestone," he said. "Runestone?" Ashura wondered as she saw the bronze and rune-covered sigil of House Royce on both letters. She opened the first. Ashura couldn't hear anything around her, nor could she notice anything, for she felt her heart elated to read the words she had been longing to read and written with the hand of the man she loved the most. "Ned," she thought as she stroked the parchment, as if trying to sense his presence from the words he had written. "My queen. Is everything all right?" she heard Maester Jellimund ask urgently. "Ned. He's safe. Arthur, Nymeria and her sisters broke him from out of King's Landing," she finally said as she felt her eyes fill with tears of joy. She hugged Talisa in excitement. "Where is he now?" Talisa asked as she broke from the hug. "In Runestone. Yohn Royce is keeping him there until he is well enough to sail to White Harbor," Ashura explained as she used a handkerchief to wipe her tear-filled eyes. "This Lord Royce, is he trustworthy?" Talisa asked. "Undoubtedly. He is an old friend of Ned's when they were boys and he hates the Targaryens after the Mad King burned his brother," Ashura replied. "What of the other letter, your grace?" asked Maester Jellimund. Ashura suddenly remembered the other letter and opened it. "It's from Arthur, confirming what Ned has said," she announced before she read what Arthur described about Ned's treatment and from whose hands. "Fucking Jaehaerys and Cersei. I don't care what it takes, if I get my hands on them, I will gladly give them to Roose Bolton and give him all my full blessing to do whatever he likes to them. I'm sure even Deanna will join in." Prydain 11. "All of this waiting is not doing any good. We should take the fight to the southern cunts before they can send more armies at us and give them time unite all of their armies into one," said Tormund Giantsbane. Many of his council were in agreement before Prydain raised his voice. "I agree, Lord Giantsbane. But I have just received good news from Winterfell," said Prydain. "What news, my prince?" asked Roose Bolton. "Talisa tells me that her brother, Joranos, is leading an army of 5,000 tiger cloaks and that they shall arrive soon in the Riverlands by sea to join us." He paused to let them react positively to the news before he gave them the bad news. "However, she also said that she has a spy in King's Landing, and this spy has said that Rhaegar is sending 2 armies toward us from our front whilst a Lannister army of 75,000 are marching on our rear," he explained. "Being trapped by 3 large armies, there's a strong chance we are fucked." He let that sink in as he looked around at the northern bannermen. Many looked eager for more battle and for fighting, but they all knew better than to charge at one army only to have another attack the rear and flanks. "What armies do they send to our front?" asked Styr Othen. "2. An army of sellswords, led by Harry Strickland of the Golden Company. And the other is an army combined of a horde of Dothraki and a legion of Unsullied, Prydain explained. Prydain glanced at Hotarnord, whose eyes lit up at the mention of the Golden Company, the Dothraki and the Unsullied. And he wasn't the only to notice. "What do you know of them, Hotar?" asked Mage Mormont. "The Golden Company are good fighters, all of them, but second only to what was the Company of the Rose," he replied proudly, which garnered chuckles and laughter. "As for the Dothraki, they are great archers and great warriors, on horseback. Not so much on foot." "And what of the Unsullied?" asked Jorah Mormont. "Hard and elite. Best fighters in the Free Cities and Slavers Bay. But they are taught to be a disciplined fighting unit. Even if they had enemies charging from all sides, they would still remain standing unless a command was given to do something else. Simply put, they are taught to follow orders, not follow their instinct," he explained. "We cannot take on both of them, with the Lannisters closing in on us." "What will we do, brother?" asked Halric. "We cannot face the Lannister army as of now. We need to focus on the sellswords and Dothraki," said Prydain. "My prince, if we confront both armies, then the Lannisters will surely come down on us," Willis Marndaly pointed out. "Not quite like that, Sir Willis. We shall divide our armies. I will lead most of the cavalry and attack the Dothraki and Unsullied. Lord Bolton shall take command of the infantry and attack the sellswords. We need to strike hard at them both simultaneously before the Lannisters charge on us," he explained. A slight smile appeared on Roose Bolton's lips at being given an important command. "When will we march, my prince?" asked Roose Bolton. "Tomorrow morning. Before the Lannisters figure out what we are doing and ride hard to stop us. I shall send Halric to meet with the Volantens and bring them to us before we start any fighting," Prydain replied. At that, Prydain left the tent and wondered about the Lannisters. His ears pricked up when he heard several howls in the distance, from a large wood, illuminated by the moonlit sky. As he heard these wolves howl, he remembered what the woman had told him in the cave. "All wolves of the world, whether a small southern wolf or the largest direwolf, will see you as their king and follow all of your commands." Prydain looked around to see that the northern lords were all leaving to their own tents to make preparations for battle. "Will they really follow my commands?" Prydain left the camp and walked towards the woods. It didn't take him long to find them. Underneath a tree ripped from its roots, there were two packs of wolves. Both packs were snarling at each other. Prydain growled loud for them to all hear. All wolves turned to him, and all it took was one look for them to change their snarling and hostile demeanors. They all calmed down and bowed before him. "Find the lion army and kill their scouts," he roared quietly. The wolves all stood straight after hearing his command. Prydain, without thinking, looked up at the moon and howled long and loud, joined by them. He could also hear loud howls from other wolf packs from miles around him. She spoke true. Not only do they follow my command, but I can feel stronger, just from the presence of the moon. When he finished, Prydain watched as the two packs ran off out of the woods. That will delay them, for without their scouts, they will march blindly towards us. And once their next scouts hear of what has happened to the others from the wolves, they will be afraid. Chapter 44, A Welcome Arrival. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Interlude 16, Giovanni de Lorenzi interpreter Ulysses M. Deus Salvo Rei personagem Bshau. Halric Stark, Giovanni di Lorenzi. We should be taking the fight to those horse-hoarder Thraki shits, not rushing to meet with the Volantenes, Halric thought as he rode alongside his household troops to meet Joranos. Though Halric knew that Joranos and his men were very welcome additions to their own army, when they were already hugely outnumbered by the southern armies and their allies, he was eager to get back to fighting. As Lord of Moat Cailin and Lord of House Kelstark, Halric was eager to make a name for himself, not only to impress his lady wife Jane, but also their future children, and so that his new house would gain a reputation. House Kelstark's sigil was that of a reindeer, and the words of the house were undeterred. Both the sigil and words had been chosen by Halric. "My lord, there they are," said Jorel Mormont, the third daughter of Mage Mormont, and whom Halric had put in command of his household guard. "I," said Halric as he saw the leaping and snarling tiger of the Magais fly on the blue banners of the small but fearsome army. Looking at them, Halric couldn't help but admire them. What say you of these tiger cloaks, Jarell? Asked Halric. They march well, my lord, and look like they know how to handle their shields and weapons. But they are slave soldiers. They will all have been whipped and blooded and seen many of their friends die in training, she pointed out. True, that does seem to be the drawback from using the tiger cloaks. Though I wonder what Joranos will say of his men and how well they will fight against the Dothraki, the Unsullied, and much later, the Lannisters. I can remember Prydain saying how he may gift them freedom once the war is over. I hope he does. No one deserves to die in a life of eternal servitude as soldiers and for their children to suffer the same fate or be simple household slaves. Halric rode towards the Volantens to greet them and was followed by Jarell and a dozen household guards, handpicked by Jarell as her best fighters. Halric recognized Joranos as he rode to meet Halric, accompanied by 10 of his own horsemen. Lord Joranos. Welcome to the Riverlands and to the war, Halric simply said as Joranos quickly sipped from his water skin. Halric, isn't it? Lord of Moat Cailin? Joranos asked. Aye, that's right, he said. Prydain waits for us at White Walls, said Halric. He did not come himself? Joranos asked. No. He's meeting with the Riverlords, Halric replied. Joranos simply nodded and spoke in Valyrian to his officers, and they gave loud commands to the tiger cloaks, who marched brilliantly and without fault, to Halric's amazement. Well, Halric, what think you of them? Joranos asked, noticing his admiring eye. A fine body of men, it must be said. But are they all enslaved? Halric asked. Joranos frowned slightly at the mention of that. It is true, they are enslaved. But they are freed after a designated time period. 10 and 5 years at the most and 10 years at the least, he explained. Have you fought alongside them for long? Asked Halric. I have commanded these men for at least 5 years now. But in all that time, I have only fought in minor skirmishes against Qohor and the Dothraki. Never have I fought in a proper war, he said. We've been doing plenty of that, did you hear? Asked Halric. Prydain's good brother looked at him in astonishment. No, what do you mean? He asked. We fought an army of 50,000 men at the Battle of Riverbend and destroyed over half of that army, sent the rest running. And Prydain killed both Prince Viserys Targaryen and his dragon, Aerys Ollys. Dragon? It's true then. The Targaryens have dragons under their command? Asked Joranos. Aye. It is. But Prydain showed us all that they can be killed. He chopped its head off, said Halric. What of its body? Halric grinned as he remembered. We boiled it and our army feasted well that night on the dragon's meat. And its bones are being forged into bows, said Halric. Dragon bone bows? You lucky bastards. How I've always wanted a dragon bone bow and a Valyrian steel sword, said Joranos. Halric glanced to his horse's scabbard, where his family's sword, Snowshard, was sheathed. Father had had this and Shatter forged from Valyrian steel and gifted to Halric and Artos respectively once they were old enough and formed their own houses. So, why is my good brother meeting with Riverlords? Are they joining us? Asked Joranos. No. Edmure Tully has asked that we do not involve the Riverlands in this war and that we do not besiege any castle nor burn fields and crops in the Riverlands. Prydain has accepted the offer already and now returns for gathering for battle, he replied. Least we could do for Edmure Tully after he saved Mother and brought her back safely to Winterfell. For battle. What battle do you mean? Asked Joranos. The Targaryens have made many friends as of late. They have gathered every sellsword army in Essos to fight for them, including the Golden Company, Halric explained. He was surprised to see Joranos smirk. Golden Company. Fools, the lot of them, he chuckled. What about the others? Asked Joranos. Dothraki and Unsullied, he explained. This time, he saw the change on Joranos' face from arrogance to anger. Dothraki? How many? He asked, eagerly. A whole horde of the scum. Around 20,000 horsemen, blood riders and screamers. Led by Akil Rakara, replied Halric. The Dothraki have been plaguing Volantis and our lands for a fucking long time. And Father keeps trying to make war on them, not just to defend our lands, but to conquer large swathes of these Dothrak, Joranos explained. An ambitious plan. Is your father still Triarch? he is. And thanks to my sister's marriage to your brother, we are confident he shall be re-elected next year. And perhaps, news of my war glories in Westeros shall impress the peoples that father gets re-elected once more, he said. So, what is the current dilemma? There are 3 armies coming for the Northern Army. Harry Strickland leads the Golden Company and all other sellsword armies towards Hog Hall, and Khal Rakaro leads his horde and the Unsullied toward White Walls. And there's an army of 75,000 Westerlands men coming from the north to crush us whilst we fight Harry Strickland and Khal Rakaro, said Halric. Halric noticed the look on the face of Prydane's good brother. Good, he should realize that war is fucking scary. I killed a few dozen men at Riverbend, and by the gods, that fucking dragon gave me night terrors for a whole 2 weeks. And Wolf Prey still has 2 more, which will only grow bigger. What is your brother's plan? Asked Jorinos. The army splits into 2. We shall join with Prydane and the cavalry and attack Khal Rakaro, whilst Lord Roose Bolton leads the rest of the army to attack Harry Strickland, Halric explained. This Roose Bolton, is he a capable leader? Asked Jorinos. He is a man of very few words. And he is clever and cunning. Though he isn't honorable, he will use fearsome tactics to fight Harry Strickland and his sellsword army, Halric replied. And what of your brother? Being asked of Prydane reminded Halric of the fighting at Riverbend. He had never ever seen Prydane fight as he had done before. Cutting and slicing through swathes of soldiers, archers and knights like it was the easiest thing in the world. But the fact that he had managed to behead a dragon, still stunned Halric. He's proven he is a capable commander and that he is a very capable fighter. And ever since the victory at Riverbend, the army think that he is a hero sent by the gods to save the north from these greedy fucking southerners, said Halric. And what do you think? I know that he is my brother and I will always be at his side. I know that he has not been sent by the gods on some holy mission, but for the north, for House Stark and for him and father, I will fight to the end, said Halric. Prydane 12. Jorinos. Brother, you are most welcome, said Prydane before he hugged his good brother. We are proud to come to fight, brother. Especially against the Dothraki scum who would ally themselves to the Targaryens, he said before they broke from the hug. Prydane turned to his assembled bannermen whom had come with him to fight against the Dothraki and the Unsullied. His brothers Halric and Artos. Jorah Mormont, Galbart Glover, Mark Riswell, Mance Rayder, Meja Sawin, Willis Mandaeli, Ricard Karstark and Robin Flint. The arrival of Jorinos and the Tiger Cloaks had brought their numbers from 12,000 to 17,000. What news of the enemy, Lord Sawin? Asked Prydane. The Lord of Sawin stood upright when being addressed by Prydane. My son, Clee, has just returned from his scouting trek, my prince. He says that the enemy number some 28,000. 8,000 Unsullied and 20,000 Dothraki, he explained. Prydane turned to Jorinos. Jorinos, in your time fighting Dothraki, what say you on how we should fight them? Jorinos looked at the map on the table before them and the horse and spear figurines symbolizing the enemy. The Northern Army may be mobile, but so is the Dothraki. They are taught to ride horses when they are old enough to walk. But they have little in the way of strategy or tactics. Khal Rakaro has no reputation of such things back in Essos, he explained. So, Lord Jorinos, if he was offered battle before he could prepare himself, he could fall into a trap, asked Jorah Mormont. Yes, I believe so, said Prydane's good brother with a nod. Prydane smiled and nodded as he looked down at the map. That is exactly what we will do. We will let them charge straight at a fortified infantry position, and leave their flanks vulnerable to a surprise attack from our own cavalry. That will take out the Dothraki, said Prydane as he demonstrated his plan by rearranging the figurines on the map. And what of the Unsullied, my prince? Asked Mark Riswell. That will be the hardest of all. They are among the deadliest warriors in all of Essos. We shall take no chances with them. I will lead our infantry to attack them to break their formation on one side, Jorinos will lead the Tiger Cloaks to attack their other side, and whilst they are busy fighting us both, our cavalry shall smash into their vulnerable positions. Prydane spent the rest of the evening talking with Jorinos, telling him about Riverbend and his letters he had been exchanging with Talisa. How will this war end? Prydane looked up in response to his question, not expecting him to ask it. Once their armies are crushed, their dragons dead and Rhaegar, Cersei, John Connington and G. Harries are all dead, Prydain snarled. Roriger, I understand. But what of the other three? Jorinos asked as he sipped from his tankard. John Connington is his hand. Father and mother have told me plenty of the twat and how arrogant and earnest he was, all in service to Roriger, his king and his love. Circia and G. Harries, mother has been telling me in her letters, they tortured my father in all of the time he was in that fucking cesspit of a Red Keep, Prydain continued. The next day, Prydain donned his helm and looked out at the dust arising from the sunrise. Time to die, Prydain thought as he reached for ice and then climbed onto his horse. A horn blasted and could be heard all across the campsite. Come on, lads. Hurry. Hurry. The Dothraki are fucking fast approaching, yelled Artos. But as he finished, Prydain breathed in and listened as hard as he could whilst staring at the dust clouds. He could hear hooting from the Dothraki screamers and the orders and shouts from across the horde. My prince. There they are, shouted Jorah Mormont. Formation. Get the men into formation. Prydain ordered. Meja Sawin called out to the men and rode all down the lines, and the infantry were starting to organize into a long wall of spears, pikes and shields. Prydain looked again to see the Dothraki. Lord Ryswell. Lord Dustin. Take your cavalry and form at the hill, but make sure those horsefuckers can't see you, Prydain ordered. Aye, my prince, they said before they rode off with the cavalry. A yell, which even the men at his side could hear, arose from the forefront of the horde of Dothraki. Prydain could see a man, maybe his age or older, waved a beautiful arrow, glimmering in the sunlight, for all the horde to see. He yelled in Dothraki and pointed at Prydain and his army before riding hard toward them. His horde all followed closely behind him, hollering and screaming as they rode towards them. Shields up! Up! Ricard Karstark yelled to the infantry. Brace yourselves, lads. The scariest bastards in Essos are coming. And whatever they come at you with, you will hold the line, you will not flee like some southern cowards, and you will kill these fuckers. Brandon Dustin called out. They formed the shield wall, and Prydain grinned as he watched the spears and pikes pierce through the gaps. But even though they could see the spears and pikes awaiting them, they were charging down too fast to stop. Even as they fired arrows from horseback at the shield wall, it did nothing to break the wall. Fire! Prydain called to Willis Mandaily. Open fire on these scum, lads. Kill them all. Willis ordered. Arrows were shot from bows and crossbow bolts were fired from Chokeonews as the horde came closer. The first to charge into the shield wall were impaled on the spears and pikes, and many horses fell to the ground behind from being shot at, tripping over many horsemen. Push. Push them back. Prydain called. Push the cunts, lads. Come on. With me. Halric called as he beheaded a dismounted Dothraki warrior with snow shard. Prydain. Jorinos called out, pointing at the hill. Prydain nodded when he saw the banners of House Ryswell and House Dustin. Prydain drew his war horn and blew hard. And as he blew it, he twitched slightly as he transformed. With me. For the north. Slaughter these fuckers. For the north, his men shouted before they followed him and rode to flank the Dothraki from the left. Prydain sliced a Dothraki in half as he closed ranks and cut another down from his horse, his head rolled away as he landed on the ground. Prydain blocked a blow as one rained his arrow down on him. As he blocked the blow with ice, Prydain punched his face, his head flew away from the rest of his body whilst Prydain turned back around. He saw the Dothraki warrior he had seen earlier at the forefront, wielding a large and beautiful arrow. That must be Kulrakaro. As he was closer, he recognized the metal instantly. It was Valyrian steel. Fuck. The woman said that Valyrian steel is one of the few things that can kill me. But seeing one of his men be cut down from his arrow cast away his fears before he climbed down from his horse and ran at him. Prydain sliced across at a mounted Dothraki as he tried to aim a bow at the crushing Dustin and Ryswell cavalry. Prydain felt the man's blood and guts land on him as he advanced on 2-3 Dothraki that were shooting at his own household cavalry. Prydain ran up to them and sliced across the closest one, splitting his body in half. The second and third aimed at him. Prydain pulled the second from his saddle and stomped on his head. His head was freed from the rest of his body from the stomp. He looked up to see the third man loosed his arrow. Prydain growled and grinned as he slapped the arrow away. He then raised his sword up high and sliced down onto his horse's head, slicing it cleanly off. The Dothraki screamed as he fell to the ground, his legs crushed from being caught underneath the horse's weight. Prydain sliced his head off before he could unsheath his arrow. Prydain suddenly turned when he could feel his senses tingling. He turned to see Kulrakaro face him, his Valyrian steel arrow raised up high and charging down on him. Prydain merely dodged out of the way, whilst the arrow pierced into the ground. Prydain stabbed him with ice in the groin, lifting him up with ice as it slowly impaled into him. Prydain waved ice around and watched as he slid off of ice and onto the ground. He looked around to see the rest of the Dothraki, a few thousand were running away. Before any man could cheer, Prydain heard Willam Dustin's voice call out to him. "My prince! The Unsullied!" Prydain ran out of the battlegrounds and looked at where the Dothraki had been charging and could see a perfectly organized army of thousands of Unsullied marching on them. "Get the cavalry back onto the hill. Joranos, take your men and hit them on their left. We attack their right." Prydain stood in front of the infantry. "With me, lads. Come on. Let's show these eunuchs how true northerners fight," he yelled out. He nodded as they cheered with him. Prydain marched with them at the front. He looked at his left to see his good brother leading the Tiger Cloaks personally on foot, with his blooded two-handed scimitar drawn. "Halt!" Prydain ordered as he began to see the brown eyes of the Unsullied through the gaps in their helms. "Shields up! Shields up!" commanded Eddard Karstark and Cleisewin. Just as the Unsullied stopped and formed a phalanx, only facing their front, the Tiger Cloaks halted their march and stood ready for battle. Prydain breathed hard as he looked around at the unflinching and hard Unsullied, smelling and feeling no fear from any of them. "I'll give them something to be afraid of," Prydain thought as he raised ice up against his helmeted face. And without a word, he ran towards the Unsullied. "For the north!" Prydain called out as he charged to the center of the phalanx. "Prince Prydain, brother, and Prydain! Come back!" He could hear behind him, but nothing stopped him. He felt the spears thrust towards him before they could touch his armor. He sliced ice across, cutting their spears before he threw himself against their shields. Prydain smashed through, knocking two down to the ground, and breaking their phalanx. He waved ice around, cutting down 3 Unsullied and beheading 2 more on both sides of him. "Charge!" he roared as loud and as hard as he could. He beheaded 4 more as he could hear the roars of the northern infantry and the Tiger Cloaks as they charged at the gaps he had created and smashed into the phalanx. But he knew, even with the phalanx broken, the Unsullied were still the greatest fighting force in the world. Prydain eviscerated 4 more as he saw Mark Ryswell and Willam Dustin leading their cavalry on the hilltop. He felt himself invigorated further before he sliced 2 Unsullied in half with 1 blow. The cavalry's charge into the Unsullied won them the day, Prydain knew as they broke their rear ranks and pushed straight into them. And as he fought, he saw Joranos cut down an Unsullied and he was impressed at how the Tiger Cloaks fought the Unsullied. They truly are equals to the Unsullied, though they are more free, Prydain thought before he grabbed an Unsullied's spear and threw it at one whom had just knocked Torrhen Karstark to the ground with the blunt end of his spear. The spear impaled through him and lifted him off his feet and he landed 6 feet back, the spear piercing into the wet earth, sodden from mud and blood. Torrhen Karstark stood back up and cut down an Unsullied just as he had been disarmed of his spear. The Unsullied fought right to the end, none had retreated nor had they faltered. But still, in spite of defeating such a great and legendary foe, Prydain was angered by the many men who lay dead from Unsullied swords and spears. His brothers and friends looked at him expectantly as men started cheering and shouting. Prydain pulled off his blooded helm and lifted ice up high for all to see. "Another great victory, lads. Yet again, we have shown the cowardly southern shits the full might of the north. And we have done just that, by defeating the Dothraki and the Unsullied. Both are considered nightmarish foes by Essos and by Westeros. But not us. Not we, who today, destroyed 2 great and worthy foes. And they will not be our last." Interlude 17, The Last Kingdom's Alexander Draymond, the new Podok. "I don't thrive on being the guy who goes topless." The Last Kingdom, The Guardian. Roderick Forrester, Alexander Draymond. "What do you see, Auril? Sty often asked as they stood in Roose Bolton's pavilion. Auril Skinchanger, a warg of Frostford, broke from his green sight and looked around the pavilion, having been using his eagle. "They're gonna send their hairless mammoths at us tomorrow first. And once they crush through us, their infantry charge at the front and the cavalry charge at our flanks," he replied. "Hairless mammoths. They're elephants." Lord Bolton looked down at his map. "What say you, Lord Bolton?" asked Harley's Hornwood. The Lord of the Dreadfort looked up with a thoughtful shrug before he glancing at the map on the table, and then he turned to Hotar Nord. "Lord Nord, what do you know of the elephants of Essos?" he asked. "When left alone by men, they are as gentle as birds, Lord Bolton. But when used for war, they will be using their enormous tusks, strength and weight to crush all in their path. However, they are easily scared," he said. "What is it that they fear?" asked Lord Bolton. "Fire. Especially when it is really close to them. I once saw an elephant turn tail and trample its watchers rather than trample its intended victims, all because oil and fire scared them to the extent that they turned and ran," he explained. "Fire. Well, how do we do that?" "Push carts filled with wood and oil at them before lighting them on fire." Lord Bolton nodded just once as Lord Nord finished his explanation and looked at the map once more before looking up again. "Auril, how many hairless mammoth are there?" asked Tormund Giantsbane. 30, he replied before drinking from a tankard of Carhold bronze. Lord Bolton nodded once again before he spoke up, forcing all to listen carefully. "We shall form according to their plans. But, as their elephants charge at us, we shall put flaming wagons in their way. That should scare them into turning around and charging into their own army. And whilst they are recovering from the elephants, we shall march fast at them, shooting arrows and crossbow bolts on them. And before they can reform their lines, we attack. A third of theirs will be dead or wounded before they have even raised a sword against us." The next day, after praying at a nearby weirwood tree with many other northern nobles, Roderick joined Father and Asher at the head of the army of Ironrath and House Forrester. Roderick looked out at the large army of sellswords arrayed before them, and he could hear the sounds of their elephants and see them slowly making their way to the front of their lines, covered with the livery of the Golden Company and of House Targaryen. "What a battle this will be," Asher commented hungrily. "Just keep your head on your shoulders, brother. Don't rush into their front lines in a hunger for glory," Roderick said. "Don't worry about me, Rod. I'll be keeping you safe and sound to return to Elena. Just as long as you both name your first son Asher," he replied before patting his back. "Ha, that'll be the day," Roderick replied before a war horn could be heard from the enemy side. And the elephants began to charge at them in full force. Even from where he was standing, Roderick could feel the ground tremble as they charged at them. "Fuck. Now would be a bad time to shit myself, wouldn't it?" Asher asked. "Maybe you'll scare them by throwing your own shit at them," Roderick suggested with a shrug. "Worth a shot," Asher replied as he held his axe up behind his shield. Roderick drew Winterspan from his scabbard whilst Father drew Frostbite and waved it around a couple of times. It must feel epic to slaughter southerners and sellswords with a sword of Valyrian steel, Roderick thought before looking back out at the elephants. "Now," came a cry from Domeric. At least 40 wagons were dragged to the front of the army, and Roderick could see were filled with bales of hay and with jars of oil on top of the hay. As soon as the men of the Dreadfort had finished coating oil on the hay bales, they ran back to their lines, and archers, led by Deanna, fired flaming arrows at the wagons. "The gods bless us with good fortune," Asher commented with a grin as he looked up at the skies. Roderick realized what he meant when he saw the smoke rising from the flames. The wind was blowing the smoke in the direction of the elephants and the enemy army. "Come on. Come on. Surely you must hate the fires and the smoke assailing you." Sure enough, the elephants neighed, their trunks blaring loudly for all to hear. The elephants still screamed as they turned around and ran away from the flames. Roderick led the cheers alongside the men of Ironrath to see the elephants run back to their lines, and show no signs of stopping. Roderick grinned when he saw the elephants running amok and trampling hundreds, if not thousands, of men. Whilst his bannerman, Locke, blew his war horn, Lord Bolton drew his sword, Bloodaltar, and pointed it at the enemy army, broken from the elephants' charge. Roderick marched as he had been taught since his first march with the Northern Army, extending his legs as far as he could for each step and doing so quickly and standing straight and ready for an attack. As they marched, Camp servants began dousing the flames with buckets and jars of water. Attack! Slaughter the northern scum, came a shout from a pretty man dressed in fancy and decorated golden armor from the front of the army. I will look for you, Golden Company twat. And I will kill you. Just as the sellswords all cheered and started to charge at them, Domeric shouted a command. Archers! Crossbowmen! Fire! Diana was the foremost to fire an arrow with her dragonbone bow. Roderick smirked as he saw how their charge halted as thousands of arrows and crossbow bolts landed on them, their shields or the ground around them. Butcher the fucking scum! Remember, Northerners, you are 10 times the men they are, shouted the great Yonumber. Roderick lifted Wintersburn up high and cheered with the men of Ironrath and ran fast towards the sellswords. Towards men wearing the armor and livery of the Golden Company. Roderick rode alongside Asher as they ran towards the broken and badly improvised line of sellswords. Roderick swung Wintersburn and it carved into the helm of a sellsword, whom fell onto his back with blood and brains pouring out. He stabbed a man who tried to hold his shield up to defend himself, but he was too slow. Roderick beheaded a large sellsword whom held up a large mace before he faced one whom wielded 2 swords. He attacked with both swords, but Roderick blocked both with Wintersburn and punched him hard on the nose. He fell back a few steps before Roderick sliced down, eviscerating him from his neck to his groin. Roderick chopped the legs off of a sellsword as he ran at him with one blow. He stabbed him in the temple and impaled his brains before facing a Golden Company man with a large axe. Roderick dodged the first blow and then the second, both of which were clumsy swings. Then he caught the axe with the blade of Wintersburn and then kicked him hard in the chest. The kick forced him back and Roderick sliced Wintersburn onto him. The fool tried to block the blow with his axe shaft, but it chopped it in half and carved into him from his shoulder blade to his heart. Roderick looked around for the Golden Company commander he had seen earlier, and then he spotted him fighting off and killing 2 men of House Whitehill. You must be Sir Harry Strickland, Roderick thought before he turned to face a mounted sellsword, and pulled him down from his saddle. Roderick sliced his head off before running to fight Strickland. Roderick sliced Wintersburn across at him, cutting down his shield from his grasp just as he had wounded a large warrior of House Umber. You've lost today, Strickland, Roderick said with a grin. But I'll be sure to take as many of your northern scum down with me, he snapped before raising his beautiful sword of steel and gold and cutting down onto Roderick. Roderick dodged the blow and swung it across, though Strickland blocked it, it had cut into his bracer, breaking it and the bracer fell to the ground. Roderick blocked his next blow and as they pushed into each other's swords, Roderick headbutted him, stunning the man whom wore no helm. He fell back a couple of steps before Roderick cut down Wintersburn onto his sword, disarming him, and then he stabbed him through the heart. You have failed. Your dragons will fail. Roriger will fail and die. The North is free today and will be free of you southern cunts forever, Roderick said before the commander of the Golden Company shut his eyes and fell onto the ground. Roderick looked up to see enemy all retreat. He cheered alongside a blooded Asher, whose shield and axe were covered with blood and brains. For Ironrath. For the North. The North will forever remember this victory, lads. Father yelled out as he lifted Frostbite up high. The North remembers. Roderick and Asher cheered alongside many other Northerners. Notes. Battle of Hog Hall is based on the Battle of Delhi between Tamerlane of the Timurid Empire and Nasruddin Muhammad Shah. Chapter 45, A Beloved Return. Chapter text. Ashura 19. My queen, the king arrives, said Sir Roderick. Ashura stood up in her chambers after hearing the words she had been longing to hear ever since Harrenhal. He's here. At last he is here, she thought as she beamed and ran out of her chambers. In the courtyard, she saw the arrival of a wheelhouse, decorated with the colors of House Mandaeli. The first to climb out was Arthur and he helped down Ned. Even though she had known him the moment that she saw him, she was horrified by what she saw. What have those evil fuckers done to you? She could see scars on his face and hands that hadn't been there before. He was far thinner than he used to be and many of his hairs were graying from his time in the black cells. And then she saw how he limped with a crutch and looked around the courtyard. He stopped looking around when he saw Ashura. Ash, he said. Ned, she replied as she slowly walked toward him. Gods, it has felt like so many years, she thought before she wrapped her arms around him. Ashura kissed Ned fully on the lips and held on to him tightly. When they finally broke from the kiss, Ned ran his hand over her face. "You're still the most wonderful woman in the world." Ashura smiled at hearing him say those words and remembering him say those words a long time ago. "I can remember you saying those exact words our first time together in Harrenhal." Whilst Ned greeted Talisa and Lyria, Ashura hugged her older brother. "How are you, Artie?" she asked. "Glad to be away from the sea, even if it is only briefly," he replied as he broke from the hug. "What do you mean?" "As soon as I am rested, I shall return back to Starfall," he explained. Ashura turned to see Ned congratulating Talisa on her news when he saw her swollen belly. They walked inside with Arthur and were seated at the high table. "What word has there been from the war?" Ned asked as they sat down. Ashura thought over the last news they had heard from the Riverlands. "Roriger has lost 2 more battles. He has lost at White Walls and Hog Hall. He has lost his Dothraki, Unsullied and Sellsword allies," she explained. Both Ned and Arthur looked stunned at what Prydain had now accomplished. "What is he doing now?" asked Arthur. "We do not know. But, my spies in the Riverlands say that Jaime Lannister is marching an army of 75,000 men to chase after them. Their plan was to keep Prydain occupied by fighting them so that the Lannisters could outflank and surround them. But the North's 2 new victories have forced them to change their plans," Ashura explained. "Has there been any news from Riverrun? Roriger hasn't figured out that Lord Edmure is the Knight of the Blue Hood, has he?" Arthur asked. "No, he hasn't. Though Lord Tully and I have made an agreement. After ensuring my safe escort to Moat Cailin, he has made it clear that no further fighting is to take place in the Riverlands that would endanger his people or his bannermen." "Is Prydain abiding by the agreement?" asked Ned. "Yes, he is. The most recent fighting has been near into the Crown Lands. But right now, he is being pursued by the Lannister army down the eastern beaches of the God's Eye, and only the gods knows what other armies are marching from King's Landing to join the Lannisters," Talisa explained. "My brother has also joined them, just before they fought the Dothraki and Unsullied. He has brought 5,000 of Volantis tiger cloaks to the war," Talisa continued. Jaime 12. As Jaime rode alongside Uncle Tijet, Uncle Gerion, his good father Daemon, Roland Crickehall and Quinton Bainfort, he thought about the events that had led them to this. First when they had heard the news of the battles at Hog Hall and White Walls. And then that the northern armies were continually fleeing along the eastern coastlines of the God's Eye. And now they were offering to meet under a white flag. Jaime wondered what he would see when he met the eldest son of Eddard Stark. "I've seen the dragons in the dragon pits. Killing one would have been no easy accomplishment, and Raymond Diari is not the sort of man who over-exaggerates a story." Jaime and his companions stopped their horses when Jaime saw their northern counterparts. He saw 7 men. 6 of them wore cloaks of the northern houses of Umber, Mormont, Bolton, Carstark, Marndale and the newer house of Raider. But the 7th simply looked frightening. Whilst the northerners were dismounted from their horses and already waiting, the 6 northern bannermen wore northern furs and boiled leathers, but they wore no helms. However, the 7th, whom wore the cloak of a snarling direwolf and whose Valyrian steel greatsword was pierced into the ground beside him, wore steel-plated armor coated with boiled leathers, and there was an image of a leaping direwolf carved on his breastplate. But what Jaime found most intimidating was his helm, of a snarling direwolf's head, and 2 holes where he could see a pair of violet eyes. "Are you going to keep that on?" Jaime asked as he climbed down from his horse. "Just making sure that you remember my helm when it comes to battle," Lannister came a growl from underneath the helm. For some reason, just hearing his voice made Jaime shiver. "And why must there be battle? The king and queen have offered generous terms for you and your army. All you must do is surrender, swear an oath of fealty, and you will all return home, unmolested, and this war ends for good, bringing a lasting peace to the realm," said Uncle Gerion. "And why should we trust the word of your king and queen? They have shown time and time again that they are fucking untrustworthy and without honor. Why the fuck should the North bow to them fucking again?" boomed the great Jon Umber. "You broke guest rights with your sister and your good brother to capture and imprison my parents and force the North to bow to fucking Southern tyranny," accused Prydain Stark before he finally removed his helm and tucked it under his arm. "Gods, he looks so much like Arthur Dayne and like his father. He has his father's long and wild northern hair and hardy look. But he has his uncle's color of hair and his violet eyes are just like Arthur's and Ashura's. That is false. It was your father who attacked, like the coward and traitor he has always been. Jaime grinned. Prydain Stark's frown darkened and for a moment, he thought that his eyes had changed color, from violet to blood red. When he saw the red in his eyes, he was frightened, more so than he had ever been. It felt as if Stark's eyes bore into him and that Jaime could see his own painful death in those eyes. It would be wise for you all to surrender.